Chapter 1275. Dark Child, a peak fourth tribulation sovereign, an ancient freak that had awakened on the nether god altar, and he possessed all sorts of great fortune. His natural talent was extraordinary, and his combat strength was extraordinary. He was viewed as an existence favored by the heavens. In the 4 years since he'd awakened, the underworld forces led by him had risen domineeringly in the upper 9 realms, and they were unparalleled in the limelight. Needless to say, this was a genius that could lead the tide of the era, but now he'd been killed in front of Kongja Mountain. His body had been slashed into pieces, and his blood dyed the sky red. The surroundings were deathly silent, and everyone's hearts were drowned by the shock that surged like a tide. The experts of the underworld forces were completely stunned. They couldn't believe it, and their souls seemed to have left their bodies. This time, they'd charged over in a formidable array and attracted the attention of everyone. They'd thought that killing Lin Sun and bathing Kongja Mountain in blood would be an easy matter. Never had they imagined that Dark Child would be killed at the first possible moment before he could achieve victory. This was something that they'd never expected. The other spectating experts were extremely dazed as well. Since the battle began, practically no one looked favorably upon Lin Sun. After all, Lin Sun's cultivation was inferior by a realm. But now Lin Sun, whom they didn't look favorably upon, had survived until the end. Everything seemed to be extremely unbelievable. Even the young golden-winged rock king, Yimoha, Loka, and the other top figures couldn't help but fall into silence. The scenes of the intense battle from before flashed through their minds, and it caused them to be unable to calm down. This battle was filled with danger, changes, and was extremely horrifying and bloody. Regardless of whether it was Lin Sun or Dark Child, both of them were like the most brilliant chess players in the world. The combat strength and methods they utilized were always unexpected and exceeded their expectations, causing them to be shocked, astounded, and astounded. In a daze, they repeatedly lost their composure. Kongja Mountain was similarly deathly silent. No one knew what sort of pressure they'd endured during these 3 days of time. Their hearts were like a taut string that was about to collapse. Yet at this moment, when they witnessed the scene of Dark Child being killed, they knew that this dangerous situation had finally been broken. The clouds parted to reveal the moon. Dark Child is dead. Finally, someone spoke with difficulty and broke the deathly silence. After that, an uproar erupted in the surroundings as if a pot had exploded. Everyone found it difficult to control their emotions. They sighed, exclaimed, sighed, and shouted. The clamor was like a landslide or tsunami. Demon God Lin is indeed undefeatable. He has been silent for 4 years. Now that he has appeared, he has killed the underworld child and established his might. He is truly a god. What a pity. That nether child was also a formidable figure, but he was killed before he could become famous in the ancient Desolation region. Fiend God Lin, in the uproar, when people looked at Lin Sun, their eyes had completely changed. His clothes were tattered and stained with blood, his body was riddled with injuries, and his face was extremely pale. But who would dare to underestimate him? However, in this boiling and restless atmosphere, Lin Sun made an unexpected move. Boom! He waved his sleeve, and a sky full of Tao light fell down, covering Ming Zi's mangled flesh and blood. The experts that noticed this scene all felt apprehensive in their hearts, and their expressions changed slightly. Could it be that the Dark Child wasn't dead? Chi. Sure enough, the mangled flesh and blood, as if they were alive, suddenly made a burst of thin and sharp sounds. Then, they turned into blood-red rainbows as thick as a thumb and flew in all directions. There were so many of them that they could not be counted. Although most of them were destroyed by the Tao light emitted by Lin Sun, there were still some that flew into the void. Everyone was dumbfounded and shocked. In the previous battle, the Dark Child had been beheaded. When everyone thought he had died, he turned into an 8-winged blood mosquito and launched a counterattack. At this time, When Lin Sun had chopped his body into pieces and thought he was completely dead, such a strange change happened. Everyone felt an inexplicable chill in their hearts. Could it be that the Dark Child couldn't be completely obliterated? It was too weird. Rumble. While everyone was extremely shocked, Lin Sun didn't slow down at all. He attacked at full speed, and the broken blades swept out like lightning, killing the escaping blood-red rainbows one after another. Earlier, he was just testing, and he wasn't sure if the Dark Child was still alive. But now, Lin Sun was finally sure that this guy wasn't completely dead. Besides being shocked, Lin Sun was even more determined to eliminate the Dark Child. The reason was very simple. This fellow was too powerful, and he had all sorts of strange methods. Once he was allowed to escape, he would definitely be killed. Once he escaped, he would definitely rise again in the future, and there would be endless troubles in the future. Pooh. 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 For a time, the blood-red rainbows in all directions were intercepted and annihilated. Damn it! Suddenly, the Dark Child's roar resounded. One of the blood-red rainbows actually avoided the attack of the broken blade, and with a buzz, it turned into a faint figure. It was the Dark Child. Above his head, the smelting god pot was floating, and it sprinkled a hazy and obscure halo that protected his figure. There was a sudden uproar. This guy really didn't die. Slash. Lin Sun didn't hesitate to slash the broken blade across the sky. Impermanence slash. With a loud bang, Lin Sun's determined blow was blocked. It was a bronze shield that was broken and old, and its surface was stained with dried blood. But at this moment it had blocked the attack of the broken blade, and besides a dazzling rain of light, it wasn't damaged at all. However, the power of this attack was so great that the Dark Child couldn't bear it. With a swoosh, the strange bronze shield was blasted away. Bang! The Dark Child's entire body was shaken. His figure was dim to begin with, and at this moment, he was like glass that was on the verge of shattering. If it wasn't for the protection of the smelting god pot, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. Lin Sun, I'll kill you sooner or later. The Dark Child let out a resentful roar. Slash. Lin Sun didn't waste any time. He charged forward, and the broken blade slashed out once more. A bunch of trash. Why aren't you attacking? The Dark Child roared in shock. His speed of dodging was even faster. The underworld powerhouses that had fallen into shock were already disheartened, and their fighting spirit had collapsed. They didn't have any interest in attacking Lin Sun at all. The Dark Child was already dead. How could they be willing to risk their lives? But at this moment, the Dark Child had unexpectedly revived. This shocked them, and at the same time, their spirits were lifted. Immediately, someone rushed out to stop Lin Sun. Kill. The leader was Zhan Yuan, a peak longevity third tribulation monarch. Kill. The other underworld powerhouses also rushed out. However, most of them moved slowly and held back. Clearly, they weren't willing to risk their lives to avoid suffering. This was called a motley crew. When the Dark Child lost, the underworld's forces were destined to fall apart. This was not an exaggeration. Swoosh. Among the crowd, Luo Jia suddenly rose into the air. Her figure fluttered like a cold rain of light, and like a true phoenix, she blocked Zhan Yuan's attack. At the same time, she said in a clear voice, Lin Sun, focus on killing the Dark Child. Leave these idiots to me. Everyone was stunned. They didn't expect that Luo Jia, the proud daughter of the immortal phoenix bloodline, would resolutely appear at such a time to help Lin Sun resolve the killing crisis. Me too. A strand of sword energy with monstrous killing intent flashed out and threw the world into disorder. Yu Jiaming appeared in the field with a sword. For a moment, the scene was completely chaotic, and the sound of fighting shook the sky. In the pursuit, Lin Sun couldn't help but smile. Then, he restrained his emotions and continued to chase after the Dark Child. Boom! The Emperor of Hell smelting god pot shook, and the obscure light rain flowed, helping the dark child block the killing attacks again and again. It looked extremely magical. However, although the dark child wasn't killed, his body became increasingly dim, almost becoming an illusory shadow that was about to disappear. There was no doubt that he couldn't hold on. Chop! Once again, Lin Sun performed the impermanence chop. But at the same time, something strange happened. A string of black rosary beads appeared out of thin air. Each bead bloomed with dense Buddhist characters, and then turned into the shadows of Buddhas. There were a total of 24 Buddhas, all of which were infinitely tall and filled the universe. They were solemn and dignified, releasing endless black Buddhist light. Tut, tut, tut. At the same time, Sanskrit sounds resounded, like the voice of demons, emitting a solemn and compassionate aura. This scene was so familiar. Before he was trapped at the bottom of Styx, Lin Sun was suddenly attacked by ancient Buddha in this way. And now this scene reappeared. Boom. Everything happened too fast, just at the moment when Lin Sun attacked. The timing was precise and ruthless. Phantoms of Buddhas came crashing down from all directions, covering the entire world with an unshakable might that could suppress everything. However, unlike last time, Lin Sun was surprisingly calm at this critical moment of life and death. Buzz. He pressed his fingers together. An invisible spatial fluctuation suddenly spread out from the tip of his finger. Suddenly, the attacks coming from all directions seemed imminent, but they were as far away as the end of the world. No matter what kind of cultivation method he used, he couldn't get close to Lin Sun at all. This scene was extremely strange, and also extremely shocking. This was the second move of the void-breaking finger of Dian, a short distance away. As soon as he pointed, it was like a natural moat. The enemy was close at hand, but Lin Sun was at the end of the world. This was a kind of defense method like prison drawing, but it was more magical and amazing. Imagine, how could the enemy get close to him when he was standing at the end of the world? The essence of this finger had involved the true meaning of space. Space was the law of the great way that only sages could comprehend. Lin Sun naturally couldn't master it. He knew how it was, but he didn't know why. He could only practice the moves and exert its power. It was like drawing skin and bones, but it was difficult to draw the heart. But even then, its profundity and might could be said to be world-shaking. At the very least, at this moment, he managed to resolve this sudden attack without any mishaps. Bang! In the distance, the broken blade that Lin Sun had displayed before had also chopped down. The Underworld Emperor's smelting god pot shook violently, and the Underworld child let out a shrill scream. Then, his voice disappeared together with the Underworld Emperor smelting god pot. What a pity, Lin Sun sighed in his heart. However, it wasn't too much of a pity. If Lin Sun's speculation was right, even if the Underworld child could survive this time, he was doomed to suffer irreparable injuries. It was almost impossible for him to recover completely in a short time. Chapter 1276. Then, Lin Sun's black eyes became cold. An uncontrollable killing intent surged in his heart, and he was on the verge of losing control. Boom! As he ran the power of star obliteration devouring way, a big abyss appeared and swallowed up all directions, forcibly shattering the 24 Buddhas in the nearby area. In the rain of light there was a sound of surprise. A monk in black with a smooth forehead and an extremely handsome face stood in the void in the distance. There was a black Buddha symbol in the shape of a lotus between his eyebrows. The black Buddha light turned into a circle of light and shadow behind his head, giving people a feeling of holiness and flawlessness. Gu Fozi! Lin Sun couldn't control his killing intent when they met again. He said calmly, "Bald ass, we meet again. This is fate. You are a heretic, and I'm the one who eradicates heretic. It's no accident that we meet again." Gu Fozi put his palms together solemnly. He, heretic? Why do I think you are a heretic? As the successor of Ksitigarbha Temple, what you have done is extremely despicable and shameless. Don't you feel ashamed? Lin Sun sneered. He'd truly never imagined that this fellow would be so shameless and lowly. 2 despicable sneak attacks had become the so-called bullsh *T karma in his mouth. If I can get rid of you, I won't hesitate to go to hell. Gu Fozhi looked indifferent and calm. Then I'll send you to hell. With a loud shout, Lin Sun rushed out with his body glowing. Last time, if it weren't for this monk's sneak attack, he wouldn't have been trapped under Styx River for 4 years and almost couldn't get out. And this time, if it weren't for this monk, how could Mingzi escape? Lin Sun didn't want to talk nonsense. The killing intent in his heart burst out like lava and was completely out of control. Buzz! A black alms bowl rose into the air, and in Gu Fozhi's hand, there was a demon-subduing pestle. His figure flashed, and he rushed to Lin Sun. In an instant, he was like a Buddha with the courage of 10,000 men. Boom! In the fierce collision, Lin Sun staggered back a few steps, and his face became paler. Gu Fuzhi grinned and said, "Benefactor, you've been heavily injured and exhausted in your battle with the Dark Child. I'm afraid you have no way out this time." As he spoke, the devil-subduing rod swept out horizontally in his palm, and it swept out a myriad of strands of Buddhist light while the sound of Buddha's chanting resounded. It seemed to carry the might to obliterate mountains and rivers and crush everything. As for the black alms bowl, it glowed faintly. Every time it descended, endless Buddhist texts would pour out, refining even the void. The monk seemed to be dignified, yet once he attacked, he was peerlessly ruthless, and every single strike was lethal and boundlessly terrifying. Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure flashed in the direction of Kongja Mountain. "Benefactor, you're a figure like a devil god. If you flee without a fight, I'm afraid it'll damage your reputation." A wisp of a smile arose on the corners of Gu Fuzhi's mouth, while a 24-lotus platform had appeared beneath his feet, and it was enshrouded by black Buddhist light. The lotus throne carried Gu Fozhi to chase after Lin Sun at an extremely fast speed. Boom! The black alms bowl shattered, and a mass of black Buddhist texts flowed, turning into the shadow of a skanda. It raised its fist and made Lin Sun stagger, and blood spilled from his lips. Just as Gu Fuzhi had said, he was indeed covered in injuries during the battle with the Dark Child, and he'd exhausted a great deal of his strength. However, he still had the strength to fight. At this moment, his black eyes were unusually calm, and he didn't say anything else as he continued to rush forward. It's a pity that the dignified Demon Lin is the biggest heretic in the world. I'm not talented, but I'm willing to subdue the devil today and return peace to the world. Gu Fuzhi's voice was indifferent, and he looked solemn as if he was sure of victory. He was indeed very calm. Even if his sneak attack was resolved by Lin Sun, he wasn't surprised. If Demon Lin was so easy to kill, he would have died 4 years ago. However, Gu Fuzhi still had absolute confidence to kill Lin Sun. Because in his eyes, Lin Sun was at his weakest at this moment. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. As long as he seized it, he could send Lin Sun to the afterlife. Boom! Not long after, Lin Sun suffered another blow. Half of his body was hit by the demon-subduing pestle, and his bones were almost broken. Gu Fuzhi let out a loud Sanskrit voice. "Heretic, if you surrender, I can hold a grand ceremony for you. Even if you die, you can still smile in the netherworld." "Bald donkey, don't talk nonsense. Don't think I don't know what you want to do. You just want to take away the Dharma scripture and the Bodhi wood. Yes, they are with me. Come and take them if you have the guts," Lin Sun shouted. "Stubborn fool," Gu Fuzhi shouted. "Buddha said that those who are merciful will kill themselves. Today I'll destroy your soul." Gradually, Kongja Mountain came into view. The chaos from before had stopped a long time ago. Under the joint attack of Luo Jia, Yu Jianming, Ji Xingyao, Mo Tianhe, and the other members of the Profound Inquiry Sword School, the experts of the Nether Earth were utterly defeated and fled as soon as the battle began. It wasn't that they were weak, but they realized that they had lost the upper hand. It was still uncertain whether the underworld child could survive. Who would be willing to risk their lives for him? Therefore, the underworld army, which was originally a motley crew, was directly defeated under the astonished gazes of the crowd. It was like a farce that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. However, when they saw Lin Sun being chased by Gu Fuzi, the originally calm atmosphere became restless again. Many people's expressions changed, and they exclaimed, "Gu Fuzi! He actually appeared again and wants to kill demon god Lin." The crowd was in an uproar and their eyes widened. Everyone knew that it was Gu Fuzi's meticulous plan that caused Lin Sun to be trapped under the sticks 4 years ago. It was also at that time that Gu Fuzi became famous and was regarded as a giant who rose from the corpse of demon god Lin, attracting the attention of the entire upper 9 realms. But what was unusual was that in the past 4 years, Gu Fuzi seemed to have evaporated from the world. No one knew where he was or where he was. However, when the news that Lin Sun was still alive spread, many people speculated that Lin Sun would seek revenge on Gu Fuzi sooner or later. But who would have thought that today, when the unprecedented battle between Lin Sun and the underworld child was about to end, Gu Fuzi appeared again. Moreover, Lin Sun was in danger. This monk is truly unscrupulous. The last time he attacked, he caught Fiend Celestial Lin off guard. And this time, the timing he chose is even more precise. Fiend Celestial Lin is riddled with injuries, so how can he fight him? When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. This successor of the Xitigarbha temple is really sinister. This time, I'm afraid Lin Sun is finished, the discussion went on. Everyone could see that Lin Sun was running for his life. It was obvious that he was not strong enough to fight Gu Fuzi. The expressions of Yu Jianming, Xiao Qinghe, Luo Jia, Ji Xingyao, and Mo Tianhe changed. They were shocked by this scene. Previously, Lin Sun had clearly gone to chase after the underworld child. But now, he was being chased by Gu Fuzi to the point that he could not hold on any longer. This caused their hearts to clench fiercely. However, when they were about to help, Lin Sun suddenly stopped in the void and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, this is a grudge between me and the Xitigarbha temple. No matter who it is, please don't interfere." Golden-Winged Rock King and the other strong warriors had no intention of helping. Hearing this, they admired Lin Sun in their hearts. Even when he was about to be in trouble, he was unwilling to ask for help. It could be said that he was proud and unyielding. Yu Jianming and the others were very hesitant because they all saw that Lin Sun was covered in blood and his face was frighteningly pale. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. But he stopped everyone from helping. Why was he doing this? Was he worried that they would be involved in the grudge with the Xitigarbha temple? "Heretic, you did a good deed before you died. At least you won't let other innocent people die with you," Gu Fuzi said indifferently, extremely conceited and calm. He was not afraid of others helping Lin Sun. For a moment, all eyes were fixed on Lin Sun and Gu Fuzi. Many people secretly sighed in their hearts. Originally, they had just solved the threat of the children of the underworld and the forces of the underworld. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun was so unlucky that he was targeted by Gu Fuzi again. They were not stupid. Naturally, they knew that Gu Fuzi had already planned to take Lin Sun's life when he was weakened. "Bald donkey, before the final battle, can you tell me where the big black bird is?" Lin Sun looked very calm at the moment. "You're already about to die. Why worry about the life and death of others?" Gu Fuzi said indifferently. "Heretic, die." Boom. As his voice fell, many Buddhist treasures swept out from his sleeves, including a ruler, a wooden fish, an incense burner, a lamp, a rui, a futon. They shone brightly in the void and suddenly turned into a large formation. Everyone's hair stood on end. In their vision, the large formation connected heaven and earth, and the light of Buddha shone, reflecting the shadows of countless bodhisattvas and arhats. All of them were powerful and had the power to shock the universe. The sound of Sanskrit resounded like the chanting of Buddha to deliver all living beings from suffering. Phenomena such as flowers falling from the sky, golden lotuses emerging from the ground, heavenly dragons coiling, celestial phoenixes fluttering, and all living beings worshipping appeared in the world. Just this scene alone shocked everyone present, and it caused the expressions of those top powerhouses to change. They felt a strong threat. Bang! 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 At this moment, Yu Jianming, Ji Xingyao, and the others didn't hesitate to attack. Even though Lin Sun had stopped them from doing so, how could they watch him suffer? But to their chills, no matter how they attacked, the large formation that shone with the light of Buddha didn't move at all. Moreover, the power it released made them feel uncomfortable all over, and they almost coughed up blood. The other experts in the surroundings couldn't help but gasp when they saw this. This is completely a lethal formation. No wonder Gu Fuzi was so confident and fearless. Who could save Lin Sun when he was trapped in this formation? Xidigarba's catastrophe formation. Golden-winged Kingrock gently spat out a few words. He recognized the origin of this formation, and he was also moved and his golden eyes flickered. This formation was composed of 18 ancient Buddhist treasures, each of which was branded with dense Buddhist runes. Once it was set up, it would have the power to ban and destroy all evils. As early as the ancient times, this formation had been so fierce that the strong in the world changed their expressions when they talked about it. At this time, in everyone's eyes, Lin Sun, who was already injured and trapped in this formation, had fallen into a dead end. Chapter 1277. Gu Fuzi had come prepared. Yu Jianming, Ji Xingyao, and the others tried their best, but to no avail. Instead, they were shaken by the formation and almost coughed up blood. The surroundings were silent. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts as they looked at the boundless phenomena and the vast Buddhist light surging out from the formation. The Xidigarba Temple was a famous sacred place in the ancient Desolation realm. Its disciples all took the task of eradicating heretics as their own responsibility. They were fearless and fearless. Gu Fuzi was an ancient freak from the Xidigarba Temple. His whereabouts were erratic, mysterious, and low-key. His strength was unfathomable. This was the first time for many experts to see Gu Fuzi in action, and they were shocked by his means. Anyone who saw such an opponent would probably be extremely fearful. Heretic, what else do you have to say? Gu Fuzi smiled. There was a black lotus mark between his eyebrows. His body was pure and holy, worthy of his title of Fuzi. Everyone sighed inwardly. Fiend Celestial Lin was ultimately doomed. Bald Donkey, do you know why I escaped here? To everyone's surprise, Lin Sun was not afraid despite being trapped in the formation. He looked extremely calm and composed. You're asking for help. Unfortunately, you're still a step behind. Don't you see that your friends can't break this formation at all? Gu Fuzi's voice was indifferent. You're wrong. I just want to keep you here forever. Lin Sun's expression was calm, and so was his words. Even his eyes showed extreme calmness. However, no one knew how violent and boiling his killing intent was at this moment. He was about to lose control. Keep me here forever? Gu Fuzi was stunned as if he had heard the most ridiculous joke in the world. A touch of pity appeared in his eyes. He sighed and said, Between life and death there is great terror. This penniless monk did not expect that even the world-famous demon god Lin could not help but start spouting nonsense when faced with death. The other experts present couldn't help but sigh. Fiend god Lin was already riddled with injuries and had expended a great deal of his energy. Now that he was forced into a desperate situation, he could not help but feel indignant. It was understandable for him to speak nonsense. Obviously, they all thought that Lin Sun was just venting his unwillingness before death. Nonsense. A cold smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips, and a palm-sized apricot flag appeared in his palm. The small flag was branded with dense and twisted markings of the Tao. Besides that, there was nothing special about it. but Lin Sun's calmness made Gu Fozi feel that something was wrong. Ha! He chanted Buddhist chants and activated the formation without hesitation. Instantly, the glow of Buddha rumbled throughout the sky like tidewater that covered the sky, and then numerous sounds of chanting that were like the chanting of Buddhas rumbled and surged out. The might of this formation was boundless. Ji Xingyao, Yu Jianming and the others were all furious, and their hearts were replaced by a touch of anger and unwillingness. How could Lin Sun resolve such a killing tribulation? In the distance, countless cultivators retreated successively. All of them knew how formidable it was and were deeply afraid of being swept into it. At this moment, Gu Fuzi's monk robes fluttered in the wind. His body was tall and he was bathed in Buddhist light. He seemed to have walked out from a holy place, and he gave off an aura that could shock the world. Lin Sun, today, I'll help you ascend from the dead. He put his palms together and chanted Buddhist sutras. For a moment, the entire Ksitigarbha formation was completely activated. Black Buddha fire fell down and turned into bowl-sized lotus flowers. Buddha's fiery lotus. Gu Fuzi was confident that even a supreme king with a higher cultivation was bound to be burned into a tribulation-forbidden land at this moment, let alone Lin Sun. But at this extremely dangerous moment, Lin Sun gently shook the apricot yellow flag in his hand. It was a simple action, but it set off an unimaginable change like the flapping wings of a butterfly. On Kongja Mountain, dense and obscure veins suddenly appeared on the rocks, plants, mines, and streams. They were shining and filled with the aura of the law. Above the sky, the clouds broke, and brilliant rainbows fell from the sky, as if the gate of the immortal world had been opened. Within a radius of 1,000 miles with Kongja Mountain as the center, magnificent formations emerged one after another. The ordinary veins on a verdant leaf started to glow, and then a fish leaped out from the river while its tail drew out a miraculous trajectory in the sky. In that instant, it seemed to be slow, but in reality, all these unbelievable scenes were completed in an instant. It was at this instant that the heavens were overturned. The earth was overturned. The world changed in an area of 1,000 miles, and it transformed into a world that was formed from countless profound Tao markings and laws. The scene in this world was still exactly the same as before, but the laws and energy in this world were completely different, because this was a formation that Lin Sun had set up, and it was like a world of its own. Wait, I can't sense the aura of the Grand Tao anymore. The world changed, and the Grand Tao changed. What ability is this? At this moment, countless cultivators were horrified and exclaimed with astonishment. It's a formation. We've been trapped for a long time. Some top figures had solemn expressions as they felt lethal pressure. In an instant, the world changed, and they had been trapped in the formation that had been set up a long time ago. It was certain that this formation was absolutely shocking. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to hide from their eyes and ears so easily. Look over there! Someone exclaimed. Following the gaze, they saw that the Ksitigarbha Great Adversity formation operated by the Arhat had dimmed at this moment. The phantoms of bodhisattvas and arhats, the magnificent and sacred surging Buddha light, and the Sanskrit chanting like chanting all lost their spirituality and power at this moment and disappeared quietly. Even the Buddha's fiery lotuses that fell from the sky were strangely still in the void, and then suddenly withered and turned into ashes and disappeared. For a time, there was a dead silence in the field, and all the heroes were shocked. This change happened in an instant, and it was incredibly fast. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun just waved the apricot flag in his hand gently. Ji Xingyao, Yu Jianming and others, who were originally anxious, were also stunned. They couldn't believe their eyes. A moment ago, Lin Sun was on the verge of death. The next moment, everything was reversed, and the world was turned upside down. This kind of method could be described as turning something rotten into something magical. I see. Emo Tianhe shouted with great excitement. He remembered that a few days ago, Lin Sun had been wandering on Kongja Mountain, paying no attention to the outside world. Sometimes he picked flowers, sometimes he moved trees, sometimes he split the mountain for stones, and sometimes he dug holes. He made the whole Kongja Mountain unrecognizable and messy. Never had he imagined that these seemingly inconspicuous and small changes would reveal the might to seize the fortune of the world and change the phenomena of the world at this moment. This was a formation. It had been set up quietly long before the army of the underworld came. Perhaps it was because of this that Lin Sun dared to tell them to just wait on Kongja Mountain and watch the situation. Even Mo Tianhe could imagine that even if Lin Sun couldn't defeat the underworld child at that time, as long as he used this formation, it was enough to change the situation. Mo Tianhe's words made Ji Xingyao and other descendants of the Xianwen sword house understand, and they couldn't help but be shocked. It turned out that Lin Sun's true trump card was this mysterious formation. Everyone had guessed wrongly before this. Tut! Gu Fuzi let out a deep Buddhist voice. His expression was extremely solemn, and he was surprised and bewildered. Obviously, he was caught off guard by this scene. However, he reacted extremely quickly and counterattacked without the slightest hesitation. But the embarrassing thing was that the Xidagarba formation he set up was deathly silent and didn't react at all. The expressions of everyone here had become strange. They didn't expect that Lin Sun, who was trapped in the formation, would turn the situation around in the blink of an eye and destroy all of Gu Fuzi's tricks. Moreover, this expanse of the heavens and the earth was a grand formation. Regardless of whether it was Gu Fuzi or all the cultivators here, all of them were trapped within it. Lin Sun was the ruler of this world. Heretic! How despicable of you! Gu Fuzi's face was gloomy as he pointed at Lin Sun and shouted. He didn't have the solemn and holy attitude from before, and he was a little flustered and exasperated. Despicable? Bald donkey, you ambushed me twice and tried to trap and kill me with the formation just now. Who's the despicable one? Lin Sun's black eyes were like lightning and his voice was cold. Although his clothes were stained with blood and he was covered in injuries, he still had a domineering majesty at this moment. Die! Gu Fuzi held the demon-subduing pestle and broke through the air at an extremely fast speed. He could already see that the apricot yellow flag in Lin Sun's hand was the key to controlling this formation. Crack! A dazzling bolt of lightning struck down, and Gu Fuzi's body trembled. His clothes were in tatters and his body was charred black. He fell to the ground with a thud. Bald donkey, this is the fate of despicable people. You'll be struck by lightning. Lin Sun stood there motionlessly. His voice was calm, but it sent a chill down everyone's spine. They were also trapped in this world, and even the aura of the Great Path was isolated and couldn't be sensed. It was conceivable that Lin Sun could use this formation to kill them if he wanted to. The only fortunate thing was that Lin Sun wasn't in the mood to pay attention to them at this moment. Besides, almost all of them were watching the show, and they had no grudges against Lin Sun. However, the thought of falling into Lin Sun's trap inadvertently made the young golden-winged Rock King and other top figures furious and fearful. But they didn't dare to say anything. Cough, cough, Gu Fuzi coughed up blood. The lightning was formed by the forbidden formation, and its power was beyond imagination, so he was also injured. His eyes flashed as he stared at Lin Sun in the distance and said, "You're indeed the world-famous demon god Lin. Good move. But do you think you can defeat me like this?" Before his voice died away, his figure suddenly flashed in the air, and the next moment, he appeared in front of Ji Xingyao, who was closest to him. Boom! In his hand, the demon-subduing pestle had already been chopped down. Obviously, he wanted to subdue Ji Xingyao and threaten Lin Sun with her. In the distance, Lin Sun's black eyes were cold and calm. This was Gu Fuzi. He seemed solemn, but in fact, he was ruthless, shameless, and unscrupulous. When he realized that something was wrong, he immediately wanted to threaten Lin Sun with the lives of others. Lin Sun had to admit that although this move was extremely despicable, it was extremely effective. Unfortunately, Gu Fuzi underestimated Lin Sun and the forbidden formation he had set up. Chapter 1278. Gu Fuzi had the combat power of the fourth retribution of longevity, which had long been noticed by the top figures present. Moreover, he came from the Xitigarbha temple and had supreme inheritance and secret treasures. His combat power was definitely not weaker than Ming Child, or even stronger. At this moment, he was going all out to take Ji Xingyao hostage. Naturally, he wouldn't show any mercy. It was no exaggeration to say that under normal circumstances, not to mention Ji Xingyao, even some of the top figures present might not be able to block Gu Fuzi's attack. However, a strange scene occurred. While he was still halfway, a formless nomological Dao pattern power surged and intersected, binding Gu Fuzi's entire body. Then, it pressed down hard. With a plop, the mysterious ancient freak of the Xitigarbha temple was suppressed to the ground. The hearts of everyone shook fiercely as they gasped. This was the power of the formation. It was so powerful that it was unbelievable. It seemed that as long as Lin Sun wanted, he could kill all enemies in this world with just a thought. He was like the master of life and death. Ji Xingyao was shocked for a moment, and then her clear eyes were filled with anger. She said, "Is this the successor of the Xitigarbha temple? How can he be so shameless and despicable?" Many people agreed with her. Gu Fuzi had always been known for being mysterious and elusive, leaving little impression on the world. But when he showed up for the first time 4 years ago, he defeated Lin Sun with a careful plan and trapped him under the Styx River. Such ruthlessness and shrewdness had long since caused others to be incomparably fearful. Until today, when he showed up again and took advantage of Lin Sun's weakness to ambush him. He even set up all the means to trap and kill Lin Sun with the formation. Originally, this series of means was beautiful and impeccable. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun was more skillful and disintegrated all of Gu Fuzi's means with a terrifying forbidden formation. If so, people wouldn't have a bad impression of Gu Fuzi. However, when he intended to attack and take Ji Xingyao hostage, it instantly caused many cultivators to feel a chill in their hearts. Was he still a Buddhist cultivator? They were ruthless, fearless, and unscrupulous in their actions. They were no different from the heretical path of evil. Heretic, you deserve to die. Buddha aura surged around Gu Fuzi, and he seemed to have transformed into a furious arhat. He broke free of his restraints and soared into the sky. He held a black alms bowl in his hand and pounced towards Lin Sun. Even though he was in a perilous situation, he was still steady, calm, and didn't panic in the slightest. Boom! The alms bowl soared into the sky and emitted a boundless Buddhist light, which gathered into a huge Buddhist hand. Every finger of the hand was like a pillar supporting the heavens, emitting boundless light. It could be said that he could cover the sky with one hand. This was an extremely famous and powerful Tao technique, Xitigarbha Buddha's hand. Lin Sun looked indifferent. With a stir of his mind, a crystal-clear whip made of divine chains descended. It was condensed by the power of the law of prohibition. With a slap, the Buddha's hand that blotted out the sky was directly smashed into pieces, turning into a rain of light that scattered throughout the sky. But another crisp crack resounded, and a bloody whip mark appeared on Gu Fuzi's handsome face. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. He fell to the ground in pain, and smoke and dust filled the air. At this point, everyone could see that in this world, no matter how powerful you were, as long as you were trapped here, you were destined to be a fish on the anvil and could only be slaughtered at will. Do you dare to remove this formation and have a fair fight with me? Gu Fuzi spoke in a low voice. His face was bloody, but he didn't care at all. His expression was terrifyingly calm. Shameless. Many people cursed in their hearts and despised him. When he used the Xidagarba formation to deal with Lin Sun, did he ever give Lin Sun a fair fight? Yet it just so happened that Gu Fuzi was able to speak such shameless words openly without the slightest blush on his face. His skin was so thick that it was truly astounding. Even Lin Sun was stunned. He couldn't believe that this was said by a Buddha of Xidagarba Temple. It was simply shameless. Puff. The whip fell, and in an instant, dozens of bloody wounds were left on Gu Fuzi's body. They were so deep that bones could be seen. It was a shocking sight. Do you think that you can make me lower my head by humiliating me like this? Gu Fuzi's voice was cold. He was covered in blood, but he didn't seem to notice it at all. He still maintained a solemn expression. No, I've never thought of making you lower your head. I just want to kill you bit by bit. Lin Sun's expression was calm. As he spoke, numerous sharp blades of law swept out, and they were dense like a storm as they enveloped down. Puff, puff. Even though Gu Fuzi tried his best to dodge, his flesh and blood were still cut, and he was beyond recognition. The miserable scene caused many cultivators to feel a chill in their hearts. Without a doubt, Lin Sun wasn't lying. He really wanted to torture Gu Fuzi to death. I admit that I've underestimated you this time. However, it's impossible for you to see me beg for mercy in a humiliating manner. Gu Fuzi's expression was cold. He seemed to have realized that it was useless to struggle in this world. He actually sat cross-legged on the ground and calmly waited for death. This caused people to be surprised. They had to admit that although Gu Fuzi was ruthless and evil, his temperament could be said to be tenacious and extremely strong. If it were any other cultivator, they would have lost control of their emotions and shouted after being tortured like this. But Gu Fuzi didn't. Ridiculous. Do you think that you're not humiliating yourself right now? Yu Jianming couldn't help but speak. Gu Fuzi glanced at him, then withdrew his gaze and directly ignored him. This made Yu Jianming furious, and he wanted to kill this bald donkey. At this moment, Lin Sun smiled and said, I heard that there's a punishment in Xidagarba Temple called 18 Purgatories. Once it's executed, it's enough to make gods and demons despair and submit. I wonder if it's true. 18 Purgatories? Everyone was confused. It was the first time they'd heard of this. But Gu Fuzi's expression changed slightly, and an inexplicable chill arose in his heart. This was a secret punishment of Xidagarba Temple, and it was specially used to deal with traitors. Because it was too cruel and bloody, it would damage the reputation of Xidagarba Temple if it was spread out. Therefore, only important figures in Xidagarba Temple knew about this punishment. But obviously, Lin Sun knew about it too. Whoosh! At this moment, Lin Sun flicked his finger, and a wisp of black Buddha fire swept out like lightning and drilled into Gu Fuzi's body. Heresy! What are you doing? Gu Fuzi's eyes narrowed and his body stiffened. He wanted to stand up and resist, but he was suppressed by layers of restrictive power, making it impossible for him to move. The first of the 18 purgatories is called the tongue-pulling prison. It's a punishment that stretches the tongue with a secret method, slowly pulls it out, and tortures it with Buddha fire until the tongue is burnt but not rotten. Then, the tongue is cut into pieces with fine sharp blades. Lin Sun's voice was calm, but the content of his words was like a cold current, making all the cultivators present feel cold all over, and their expressions changed abruptly. This punishment was simply perverted. Gu Fuzi suddenly screamed, his body twitching and his face distorted. Everyone saw that his tongue was pulled out inch by inch, and it was burning with black Buddha fire. The whole tongue was gradually charred. Obviously, he was suffering the torture of the tongue-pulling prison. Some cultivators couldn't even bear to watch it anymore. Gu Fuzi, the successor of Xidagarba Temple, was also a ruthless character in the upper 9 realms. Now, he was suffering such cruel torture in front of everyone. Who could stay calm? Many cultivators were horrified that Lin Sun dared to do this. Only then did they realize that the title of Demon Lin was not just for show. Heresy! I will remember this hatred, and I will repay you in the future. Gu Fuzi suddenly calmed down. He abandoned his six senses, and the sharp pain on his tongue could no longer affect his mind. Lin Sun smiled indifferently. The torture of the 18 purgatories was not so easy to resist, and it was useless to abandon his six senses. Let me do it. However, just as Lin Sun was about to continue, a loud cry rang out, and a big black bird flew across the sky. What made Lin Sun's eyelids twitch was that this bird could enter and exit his formation freely, as if there was no one there. However, when he saw the big black bird appear, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel relieved. He was really worried that Gu Fuzi would harm this thief bird. As soon as the big black bird arrived, it picked up the black pot on its back and smashed it on Gu Fuzi's head with a clang. Gu Fuzi, who had always been calm in front of him, showed a rare trace of panic at this moment. He said angrily, "Young martial uncle, are you going to help an outsider to deal with me? Damn it, do you still care about me, your young martial uncle?" The big black bird's voice was full of hatred, and it smashed the black pot down again. Soon Gu Fuzi's head was swollen with dense bump. Moreover, he was screaming incessantly, as if he was suffering from extremely terrifying pain. In the distance, everyone was dumbfounded. The appearance of the big black bird surprised them, and what was more surprising was that Gu Fuzi called the bird young martial uncle. This was completely out of everyone's expectations. In the end, Gu Fuzi was completely smashed to the ground. His body kept twitching as if he was having an epileptic fit. He foamed at the mouth, and his head was covered with red bump. He was extremely miserable. Earlier, his figure was pure and holy like a true Buddha that had descended into the world, and his bearing was peerless. Even though he was being suppressed, he was still composed and unafraid of death. But now it was too horrible to look at, which made people feel sorry for him. Clang! After an earth-shattering noise, Gu Fuzi was directly knocked out by the black pot. Everyone couldn't help but gasp. Miserable! It was too miserable! The dignified Gu Fuzi had actually been knocked unconscious by a black wok. If news of this were to spread, then it would definitely become a huge joke. Suppress! The big black bird shouted. The black pot hummed and emitted a strange wave. It suddenly swallowed Gu Fuzi's body and disappeared. Are you going to save him? Lin Sun frowned. The big black bird had a complicated expression and said, "You're wrong. This is just a clone of Gu Fuzi. His true body hasn't appeared all these years." Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly narrowed. A clone could have the power of the fourth tribulation of immortality? Then how strong was his true body? For a moment, Lin Sun's heart was also stirred. This news surprised him. It was unbelievable. Chapter 1279. The big black bird said quickly, "Let's solve the problem in front of us first. I'll tell you the truth in detail later. But you can rest assured that Gu Fuzi is not much stronger than his doppelganger." Lin Sun nodded. After that, his gaze swept through the surroundings and swept past all the cultivators, and he noticed the shock, dazed, and fear on their faces. "You can go now." As soon as Lin Sun said this, most of the strong people in the field breathed a sigh of relief. Being trapped in this world, they were really worried that Lin Sun would vent his anger on the onlookers if he didn't agree with them. But it was obvious that although Lin Sun was called the devil, he was not a person who killed innocent people. Thank you, Taoism Peer Lin. Congratulations to Taoism Peer Lin for turning the tide and defeating all enemies. From now on, no one in the upper 9 regions will dare to underestimate you. The mountains will not change, and the rivers will flow forever. Taoism Peer Lin, please take care. In the noisy voices, the practitioners in the field left one after another. However, it was difficult for them to calm down. Today's battle was full of twists and turns and variables. It could be foreseen that it would not be long before the whole upper 9 regions was bound to be shocked by the news of this battle. "Brother Lin, I'm Yi Mok. Now there are only a few years left before the end of the absolute summit domain. I hope that one day I can fight with you." In the distance, Yi Mok said loudly, "It's my honor." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said casually. Yi Mok smiled and turned to leave. Today's battle made him witness Lin Sun's fighting power, which aroused his competitive spirit, so he took the initiative to challenge Lin Sun. "Lin Sun, don't be complacent. Although Mingzi is strong, he is not a big deal. If there is a chance, I will let you see what is the strongest in person," the young golden-winged roc said coldly. After saying this, he turned into a golden-winged roc and flew away. Lin Sun frowned. Luo Jia said with a smile, "Don't pay attention to this person. He is a pure-blood descendant of the golden-winged roc. He has awakened his ancestral blood and is extremely unruly and cruel. He said this just because he is not convinced of your strength. It's not malicious." Lin Sun was noncommittal. In next to no time, the cultivators in the surroundings had left successively, and only an expanse of desolate landscape remained. All of this had been destroyed during the battle just now. "Come, let's head into the mountains for a chat." Glancing at Loka, Yu Jiaming and others, Lin Sun smiled from the bottom of his heart and invited them to go to Kongsha Mountain together. The child of the underworld led the army of the underworld and set off aggressively. He wanted to kill Lin Sun and wash the Kongsha Mountain with blood. But as a result, the son of the underworld was suppressed by Lin Sun at the first time. Only a wisp of his remnant soul escaped in panic, and the powerful force of the underworld collapsed without a fight. This news, with an incredible speed, spread throughout the upper 9 realms on this day, causing monstrous wave. At the same time, the news that Gu Fozi reappeared but was bound and suppressed by Lin Sun spread. For a time, the upper 9 realms was in a complete uproar. Based on today's battle, demonic god Lin can already be ranked amongst the ranks of overlords and giants amongst his peers. I wonder how high the current fiend god Lin will be able to obtain on the heavens' chosen golden roll. The underworld is destined to fall apart. After 4 years of silence, Lin Sun has become famous all over the world. In the future, who in the upper 9 realms can suppress the rising momentum of Lin Sun? All kinds of discussions and uproars continued. Moreover, as time went by, the news of this battle in front of Kongsha Mountain was still fermenting and spreading. Kongsha Mountain, Qingsang Peak. In the lush bamboo forest, the clear stream was flowing. Lin Sun, Ji Xingyao, Mo Tianhe, Loka, Yu Jiaming and others sat on the ground, with immortal wine, fruits and vegetables, and spiritual tea on the table in front of them. They chatted and talked about the old days while sipping tea and drinking wine, quite harmonious and comfortable. At that time, the sky was bright, the clouds were misty, the bamboo forest was dancing, and the stream was gurgling. It was quiet and secluded. A group of kindred spirits gathered together and had a comfortable and carefree time. "Jianming, I heard that you have been running around for me all these years. Come, let me propose a toast to you." Lin Sun raised his cup and laughed. Lin Sun hadn't seen Yu Jiaming for many years since they parted in the West Heng realm. Seeing that Yu Jiaming had also set foot on the top of the second tribulation of the longevity realm, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh. "Okay." Yu Jiaming drank up in one gulp, feeling very happy. Back then, Lin Sun had saved his life. He had never forgotten such a great kindness. "Miss Loka, thank you for coming this time." Lin Sun raised his cup again. Loka's great change also amazed Lin Sun. This descendant of the Miluo Palace from the Earth Imperial Universe was like an orchid in an empty valley, quiet and beautiful. Back then, they had participated in the Tao Discussion Lantern Festival together and crossed the Realm River together. Now, Loka also had the strength of the third tribulation of the longevity realm. She was a descendant of the deity Phoenix. Both her talent and foundation were amazing. What was certain was that these years, not only had he made rapid progress on the path of Tao, but the others had also had their own fortunes and opportunities. When old friends reunited, they should drink to their heart's content. Cup after cup of wine, when recalling the past, everyone couldn't help but sigh with emotion, but also a lot of laughter. In the end, Lin Sun also felt a little tipsy. He hadn't been so relaxed for a long time. Late at night, Yu Jiaming, Loka and the others left. They had their own paths and pursuit. Seeing that Lin Sun was fine, there was no need for them to stay any longer. Lin Sun didn't stop them. Because this was cultivation. The bright starlight was like silver mist, covering the dancing bamboo forest with a layer of mist, like a dream. Late at night, in a bamboo house built by Lin Sun himself, the big black bird was drunk and paralyzed on a chair, muttering, "Alas, if I could be so carefree and happy every day, how lucky would I be in this life?" Lin Sun sat on one side, meditating quietly. Today's fierce battle had injured him and consumed a lot of his energy. Now his physical injuries had already recovered, but his physical strength was in urgent need of replenishment. "Don't you want to know the details of Gu Fozi? Let me tell you." The big black bird flapped its wings and stood up from the chair. The drunkenness in its eyes also disappeared, and it was as calm as snow. In ancient times, there was a real sage king in the Ksitigarbha temple. His Dharma name was Good and Evil Purifying Buddha. With great wisdom and perseverance, he created the Good and Evil Purifying Scripture, which was full of wonders, and this Gu Fozi was the last disciple of Good and Evil Purifying Buddha. He was hidden by his master in a secret realm of the Ksitigarbha temple. Only today did he come out. Gu Fozi was born with Buddha bones. His master once said that his wisdom was far better than mine. When he stepped into the sage realm in the future, his achievements would be above mine. You can imagine how heaven-defying this guy's talent is. But that's not important. What's important is that the inheritance that Gu Fozi cultivated is also the Good and Evil Scripture. Lin Sun listened while meditating. His mind was as calm as an ancient well. It was not until he heard the scripture of good and evil salvation that he felt a ripple in his heart. Because in the great silent scripture left by the holy monk Duji, there were also some secrets about the good and evil purifying Buddha scripture. The big black bird continued, "The most amazing thing about this scripture is that it can cultivate a doppelganger with the same cultivation as itself. The doppelganger holds good and practices good deeds. The doppelganger holds evil and practices evil deeds. The two bodies of good and evil, the paths they take are completely different, yet they lead to the same goal. When cultivated to the extreme, the two bodies of good and evil can be completely fused together, and there'll be no distinction between them to create a Saint Buddha glass body that's boundlessly profound." Speaking of this, the big black bird suddenly sneered. However, this Gu Fozi is more ambitious. He wants to reverse good and evil, using the original body to hold evil and the doppelganger to hold good, in order to find another way to transcend the good and evil purifying Buddha scripture created by his master and form his own. It's a pity that although he is talented, he is not a saint after all. He doesn't know that it's impossible to succeed with his wisdom. Now he can't distinguish good and evil at all and has completely gone astray. Lin Sun frowned and said, "Astray?" The big black bird suddenly sighed. "Yes, astray. However, this Gu Fozi has great luck. According to reason, he will have an accident sooner or later if he continues to cultivate like this. But who would have imagined that he would find a heaven-defying and great fortune in the upper 9 realms, and it allowed him to make up for what he lacked and step onto a completely different path towards the Tao." Hearing this, Lin Sun was also speechless. Immediately, he realized a problem and said, "The doppelganger that was suppressed today, shouldn't he cultivate the method of good deeds?" "Yes." The big black bird nodded. Lin Sun looked strange. How could such a ruthless, black-hearted, shameless, and unscrupulous guy cultivate the method of good deeds? It seemed ridiculous. "You're mistaken," the big black bird reminded. The good and evil in Gu Fozi's heart are not necessarily the good and evil in your understanding, because everyone has a different understanding of good and evil. Just like Gu Fuzi's clone of kindness. Perhaps in his eyes, getting rid of you is a good deed. This explanation was obviously nonsense. But Lin Sun understood and said, "So, his original body is more terrible than his doppelganger." The big black bird nodded. "Indeed, but he can't be too powerful. He needs to maintain a balance between good and evil in order to keep his heart clear. Otherwise, whether his main body is too powerful or his clone is too powerful, it will be a disaster for him." "Do you know where his original body is?" Lin Sun asked. "Buddha Earth." The big blackbird said one word at a time. Suddenly, Lin remembered that Yulinkong had reminded him a few days ago that he could go to the Buddha land if he wanted to find the ancient Buddha when he left after dispelling his inner demons. Moreover, he had asked Ji Xingyao and learned that Buddha Earth was located in Zhen Mountain. It was an extremely dangerous forbidden area. It was said that there was a 3,000-story Buddha tower made of white bones. Chapter 1280. After the big black bird's explanation, Lin Sun finally understood that he was wrong. Even if Gu Fozi's original body was stronger than his doppelganger, it wasn't much stronger. "I've decided to go to the Buddha land." Lin Sun looked at the big black bird. "Do you want to go with me?" "Yes," the big black bird said without hesitation. Lin Sun was puzzled. "Gu Fozi called you martial uncle, and you still want to help me deal with him?" The big black bird was silent for a long time before saying, "It's just seniority. If possible, I'd rather you eradicate the entire Ksitigarbha temple." As he finished speaking, his voice carried a wisp of hatred. Lin Sun didn't say anything else. He had once learned from the big blackbird that the reason why he was seen as a heretic by Gu Fuzi was because he had obtained the great scripture of solitude left behind by holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Divine Empress, as well as the Bodhi wood. The big blackbird was obviously on holy monk Du Ji's side. Lin Sun suddenly thought of something. "By the way, you took away Mingzi's smelting god pot. Why did he take it back?" The big black bird sighed. "I didn't want to, but the smelting god pot was imprinted with a terrifying restriction, and I couldn't refine it at all. It's a pity. However, although I wasn't able to keep the god refining pot, I managed to obtain some of the treasures sealed within it." Speaking of this, he laughed again and flapped his wings. A suet jade bottle appeared and landed in front of Lin Sun. "This is a bottle of dragon marrow restoration pill. Although there are only 3 of them, they are one of the best elixirs in the world. As long as you consume one, you will be able to instantly recover no matter how severe your injuries are. Of course, the most amazing thing is that this pill is of great benefit to transcending the tribulation. Why do you think Mingzi could easily enter the 4th tribulation of longevity? This pill is of great help." Lin Sun was moved. He picked up the jade bottle, and as soon as he probed it with his divine sense, he heard a series of dragon roars, colorful light rain, and fragrance permeating the air. Looking carefully, it seemed as if there were 3 little dragons wriggling about within the jade bottle, and they were extremely lifelike and miraculous. In fact, there were 3 elixirs. "Apart from this elixir, what other benefits did you get?" Lin Sun asked. The big black bird immediately became vigilant and shouted, "Brat, don't have any crooked ideas. Even if I give you the other toys, they won't be of much use." Obviously, this thieving bird had obtained quite a lot of benefits from the Dark Child's God refining pot. Lin Sun didn't bother to argue with it and concentrated on his cultivation. 3 days later, Lin Sun's injury was completely recovered. Furthermore, after experiencing a bloody battle, his cultivation had improved once again, and he was already approaching the perfection of the longevity 3rd tribulation realm. Lin Sun had already set up a forbidden formation on Kongzha Mountain, which had exerted its power to suppress everything in the battle 3 days ago. Before leaving, Lin handed the apricot flag to Ji Xingyao. At this point, even without his presence, the profound Sikh sword house wouldn't have to worry about being attacked by the other great powers. On behalf of profound swordsmanship house, Ji Xingyao gave the 3 divine herbs to Lin Sun to express her gratitude. Lin Sun did not refuse. During the 4 years he was trapped at the bottom of the Styx River, all the royal medicines he had were used up, and there were only a few divine herbs left. The divine herbs given by Ji Xingyao had slightly solved Lin Sun's urgent problem. Take care, everyone. In the void, Lin Sun cupped his hands. Take care. Ji Xingyao, Mo Tianhe, and other successors of profound swordsmanship house all came to see him off with solemn expressions. On this day, Lin Sun left with the big blackbird to cross the distant fire realm and go to the Gen Mountain realm. On the way, Lin Sun took the treasure ship, which was not very fast, but not slow either. I don't know why Old Toad and Alu didn't show up, Lin Sun was a little worried. The battle a few days ago had already spread throughout the upper 9 realms. It was not difficult to know that Lin Sun was on Kongja Mountain as long as he paid a little attention to the news. But until now, Old Toad and Alu hadn't shown up, which made Lin Sun realize that their situation might be a little abnormal. Good treasure. The big black bird walked slowly with a pair of wings on its back. When it saw the blood-colored sword in Lin Sun's hand, its eyes suddenly lit up. This sword was as red as blood, and its blade was crystal clear. It could be clearly seen that inside the sword, there was a blood-colored nether river flowing, in which the corpses of gods and demons were floating and sinking. The scene was extremely amazing. It was the legendary Yuan killer sword. During the battle with the Dark Child, Lin Sun had taken this sword as a spoil of war. This sword is a real congenital holy weapon, born in the Nether River. In ancient times, it was notorious, and I don't know how many sages' heads were cut off. The big black bird's eyes were crazy, and it approached stealthily, almost drooling. The most amazing thing is that this sword can kill sages without karma. Can I touch it? As it spoke, it stretched out its claws and grabbed the Yuan killer sword. With a swoosh, Lin Sun put away the sword first and slapped the big black bird's claws away, saying, "Be careful, or I'll cut off your claws." The big black bird cursed angrily. "It's just a broken sword covered with layers of seals. It's hard for you to exert its full power without becoming a sage." Lin Sun was certainly clear about this. Just now, he had already checked that there were 9 layers of seals on the Yuan killer sword, all of which were obscure and terrible. Like chains of the Great Way, they imprisoned the power of the sword. With Lin Sun's current cultivation, he could only open 3 layers of seals at most. However, he didn't intend to do so. This was the absolute domain, where there was no divine existence. If the seal of the sword was lifted and the aura of the sage was revealed, it would be a disaster rather than a blessing. Of course, with the current power of this sword, it could fight against the broken sword, so it could be regarded as an extremely powerful killing weapon. Hey, this bronze shield is interesting. When it saw Lin Sun take out another broken and blood-stained bronze shield, the big black bird's eyes widened. This treasure was also taken from Ming Child. At that time, when it chased Ming Child, it was difficult to leave a scratch on this shield with the power of impermanence chop. It seemed to be extremely powerful. "Do you recognize this treasure?" Lin Sun asked calmly. "The blood stains on this shield are obviously holy blood. Look here, there is a layer of dense Taoist pattern. Although it is incomplete, the aura it exudes is so powerful that it makes people tremble." The big black bird's eyes were shining, and it seemed that it couldn't wait to swallow the shield. "If I guess right, this should be a holy shield." Lin Sun nodded and put away the treasure without a trace, but he felt comfortable and happy in his heart. He didn't expect that the 2 trophies from Ming Child were both holy weapons, and the origin of the Yuan killer sword was extremely amazing. This gain wasn't inferior to seizing a great fortune. Well, Ming Child really has a lot of treasures. He deserves to be the favorite of God with great luck. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. The big black bird also agreed and sighed, of course. I know very well that there are still a lot of good things sealed in the refining spirit pot in the boy's hand. Next time, let's work together and rob him again. Lin Sun nodded and appreciated the big blackbird's idea. Each of the upper 9 realms was like a vast and boundless world. Half a month later, Lin Sun and the others crossed the 3 realms of Kanshui, Thunderous, and Wind, and arrived at Gen Mountain. The atmosphere in each realm was different. Lin Sun had a deep understanding of this along the way. For example, in Kanshui there were oceans, lakes, and rivers everywhere, just like a world of water. In the thunder-shaking realm, it was shrouded in thunder all year round, and the world was full of destructive killing intent. According to the big blackbird, if one was not afraid of death, he could temper his cultivation in the thunder-shaking realm, and it would be easier to perceive the breath of longevity test. Of course, the premise was that he wouldn't be struck to death by the omnipresent thunder. Now Lin Sun and the others arrived at Gen Mountain. It was a different scene. Mountains stood between heaven and earth like forests, winding up and down as if they were boundless. There were mountains everywhere, some majestic, some lofty, some steep, and some rugged. Each of them had a different charm, which was spectacular. Have you heard that there is a great change in the Buddha land? It is very likely that there will be a nature-defying creation. Now, many strong people have set off for it. On the way, Lin Sun suddenly heard a conversation. It was a group of cultivators who were also on their way. Really? That is the great ominous forbidden land. Countless strong people have entered it over the years, but how many of them can come back alive? Who knows? In short, I heard that some of the top 30 people on the Tianjiao Golden List have been alarmed and have set off for it. Who are they? Qiliang Xiao, Lin Shui the Holy Girl, God. These are all overlords whose names shake an area. As those cultivators gradually went away, the discussion gradually faded away. Lin Sun and the big black bird walked out from the darkness, and they looked at each other and frowned. They hadn't expected that there would be a great change in the Buddha land. No matter, let's go and have a look first, the big blackbird said. Immediately, they continued on their way. Along the way, they saw many cultivators, and they were all discussing things related to the Buddha land. Most of the discussions pointed to the same rumor, and it was very likely that an ancient great emperor's battle scripture would be born in the Buddha land. The great emperor's battle scripture. Just 3 words were enough to make one's imagination run wild. 2 days later, Lin Sun entered the area of the Buddha land under the lead of the big blackbird. This was a great ominous place. The world was filled with barren, withered mountains, and the air was suffused with a horrifying murderous aura. As they walked, just the whistling wind was enough to crush any cultivator below the king realm. It was extremely terrifying. Moreover, the deeper they went, the heavier the murderous aura became, and it was oppressive to the point of suffocation. In the distance, a scream suddenly sounded. Lin Sun suddenly raised his head and saw a king with the cultivation of the longevity realm being swept up by a black demonic wind into the sky. Chapter 1281. That's the wind of disaster. The big black bird gasped. This is an ominous wind that can blow away the soul of a saint. It's terrifying. Lin Sun was also shocked. No wonder the Buddha land was regarded as a place of great danger. It was indeed terrible. On the way, Lin Sun and the others were all vigilant. Whoosh, the black wind of disaster was like a cloud of black mist, flying in this side of the world, which was frightening. Fortunately, it was traceable and could be avoided in advance. Otherwise, no one would dare to wander in this area. Roar! It wasn't long before a peerlessly miserable howl resounded out from a barren mountain that didn't have a single blade of grass growing on it. Looking from afar, a tall figure of thousands of meters appeared on the top of the mountain. Its eyes were scarlet, larger than a lake, and its head reached the sky. Its whole body was covered with rolling blood mist. The roar made Lin Sun and the big blackbird's blood and chi churn. This is the remnant soul of the heavenly devil. The big blackbird screamed. The heavenly devil was a strange species that wandered in the outer space. It was extremely terrible. According to the ancient records, when a saint passed the tribulation, he would be attacked by the heavenly devil. One careless mistake would lead to the destruction of his soul. And here, a remnant soul of the heavenly devil appeared. Its tall figure was hidden in the rolling blood mist, emitting a fierce and awe-inspiring aura, which made the world shake. However, if you looked carefully, you would find a golden talisman branded on the remnant soul of the heavenly devil. It was shining and full of zen. Om Ma and I Ba Mu Ho. This is the most famous Buddhist incantation of 6 runes. The big black bird recognized the talisman, and its eyes almost popped out. This talisman must have been left by a holy monk. Otherwise, it would be impossible to suppress that evil creature. So, the Buddha land is very likely to be a forbidden area related to Buddhist cultivators? Lin Sun's eyes flashed. The blackbird said casually, "Of course. Ancient Buddha's main body obtained a heaven-defying fortuitous encounter here, and it filled up the gaps in his path towards the Tao. After that, it lamented. Unfortunately, this talisman of 6 runes of truth can't be taken away. Otherwise, with just this treasure alone, it would be able to exert an attack equivalent to the full strength of a Saint Realm expert. It would definitely be a great weapon." "What's that?" It wasn't long before Lin Sun saw a huge city in the void in the distance. The city was extremely vast, and it was like a piece of land that floated in space. The city walls seemed as if they were constructed from dazzling divine gold, and they emitted a grand and brilliant divine aura. Just looking at it from afar caused one to be shocked. The large blackbird was also shocked. How could such a divine city exist in such a strange and dangerous place? "Let's go take a look." Lin Sun and the big blackbird approached there. As he got closer, he realized that the city in the sky resembled the legendary, divine city. It was too sacred and majestic. The dazzling luster dyed the heavens and the earth in a layer of gold. At the same time, auspicious clouds gathered in the sky above the city, and auspicious rain fell. Divine rainbows surrounded the city, and rays of light flowed. Such a strange scene seemed to be out of this world. In front of this city, people were like ants, and they felt insignificant because it was too majestic and huge. Lin Sun and the big blackbird were a little stunned. Along the way, the Buddha land was extremely dangerous and strange, and there would be terrifying murderous intent at every turn. For example, the wind of calamity, the devil remnant soul, and so on. But now there was a place like a divine city floating in the void. It was brilliant, majestic, and sacred. How could people not be shocked? "There's someone here." Lin Sun soon discovered that there were many figures of cultivators standing near the divine city, and they were all looking at and examining the divine city. Together with the big black bird, he inched closer without a trace, and a wave of discussion also entered his ears. "In the past, I've never heard of such a sacred city in the foot of Fanland." "You're right. This city only appeared yesterday, and it's extremely strange. Why don't all of you go in and have a look and choose to stay here instead? Fellow Taoist, you've just arrived, right? So you're utterly unaware that everything that seems divine is an illusion. This city is far more terrifying than you can imagine." As they listened to the discussion, Lin Sun and the big blackbird understood that this city had actually only appeared yesterday. No wonder so many cultivators have risked their lives to converge here recently. So it turns out that a shocking change really has occurred in the Buddha land. Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. It can't be. This city is so divine, so how terrifying would it be? At this moment, someone couldn't help but ask. Bang! His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when a wave of deafening rumbling resounded high in the sky, and then the divine radiance that covered the sky transformed into a strange black mist that seemed like ink. The auspicious clouds, auspicious rain, divine rainbows, and radiance had all vanished within the black mist. Most horrifying of it all was that the lofty city that seemed to be constructed from divine gold had actually transformed completely pitch black. At the same time, waves of hair-raising shrill cries sounded out from the lofty city. If one looked carefully, one could vaguely see numerous broken and decaying corpses walking in the city, and they were flickering with shadows and enshrouded in black mist. "My God!" someone shouted and was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. Some experts swallowed with difficulty, and their hair stood on end. Previously, the city was divine, magnificent, and brilliant, but now it seemed to have transformed into a ghostly realm, and it was a strange and horrifying scene. The fierce and ghastly aura that assaulted their faces caused this part of the world to completely change. Even Lin Sun and the big black bird felt a chill in their hearts. It was too strange. "Look over there." The big black bird's eyes shot out a divine light as he looked at the top of the city gate from afar. There was a line of words above the gate: "The land of the tragic death, no living beings enter." Every word was dripping with blood and enshrouded in black mist, which was terrifying. According to legend, at the beginning of ancient times, there was a city of the tragic death between heaven and earth, and it was regarded as a place where the souls of the dead could not pass through. Any innocent soul that died from natural or man-made disasters would be trapped in the city of the tragic death forever. The big black bird suddenly remembered a rumor and told Lin Sun, "In my opinion, even if this city is not the legendary city of the tragic death, it must have a great connection with it." Lin Sun was shocked. The city of the tragic death? Looking up at the top of the city gate in the distance and the 8 bloody words, Lin Sun also realized that the big black bird's speculation might not be false. There must be a great mystery hidden in this place. Is there anyone willing to go and explore it together? Suddenly, someone spoke loudly. However, everyone looked at each other, but no one answered. "Friend, since yesterday dozens of groups of experts have entered it, but without exception, none of them came out again," someone kindly reminded. Just these words alone caused those cultivators that had just arrived to feel a chill run down their spines. When they looked at the city in the air again, their eyes changed. "Come with me. This place is a place of great danger for others, but for you and me, it's an excellent treasure land." The big black bird suddenly transmitted his voice and took Lin Sun to the distance. The city in the air was extremely huge and vast. What was surprising was that there were 36 gates around the city. Without exception, above each gate, there were 8 bloody words: "The land of the tragic death, no entry to the living." Before long, the big black bird and Lin Sun found a city gate with few people. That city is full of trapped, vengeful spirit. When you enter it later, you only need to use the methods in the great scripture of solitude, and you can easily send them to the afterlife. The big black bird suppressed the excitement in its voice. "This is a good thing with boundless virtue, and it is very likely that we will get great benefits." Lin Sun understood and was also very excited. "Besides, I have some Buddhist treasures that I collected from the doppelganger of Gu Fozi. Even if there is an accident, it should be able to avoid danger." "Then let's go." "Let's go." Immediately, a man and a bird soared into the sky, like 2 flashes of lightning, and rushed to the city gate. "Look, someone is going to die again." In the nearby area, someone sneered. For the opportunity, he even risked his life. Who can he blame? Many people sneered and were not optimistic about the action of Lin Sun and the big black bird. In the city, the black fog lingered, covering the sky and the sun. "Look at these buildings, they have obviously existed for a long time. The vicissitudes of life are overwhelming, which proves that this city should have existed a long time ago." The big black bird's eyes were bright, looking around. They walked on a spacious street with rows upon rows of houses on both sides. However, they were all extremely old and decrepit, and some had even collapsed into ruins. Lin soon noticed that these houses were all built of strange black stones, and some walls were branded with some vague patterns of flowers, birds, insects, fish, and ancestors offering sacrifices. But soon, Lin soon had no time to pay attention to these. The atmosphere in the city was extremely cold, and the air was filled with a real fierce spirit, which made Lin soon's skin tingle. In the depths of the black fog ahead, there were ear-piercing screams, like the howls of ferocious ghosts. The atmosphere was depressing. Lin soon ran the inheritance of Dharma scripture, and suddenly a stream of Buddha light flowed around his body, which was auspicious and solemn, sweeping away all the discomfort and pressure. It worked. Lin soon was refreshed. At the same time, the big black bird threw a exorcism pestle to Lin soon, and held up a black alms bowl. Both of these treasures were obtained from the doppelganger of Gu Fozi, who was now suppressed in a black pot on the back of the big black bird. Boom! Not long after they moved forward, a sudden turbulence sounded from the black fog. One figure after another charged over, letting out ferocious roars and seething with killing intent. It was as if a group of evil spirits from hell had appeared. Upon closer inspection, although they were not evil spirits, they were almost the same. They were all decaying corpses with broken bodies. Some were missing half of their bodies, some had holes in their skulls, some had their chests torn apart, and some only had half of their bodies left to run wildly. Look, it's a group of resentful spirits that have been trapped here for countless years, waiting for us to expiate them. Chapter 1282. Boom! As if attracted by the big black bird's wild laughter, a corpse with a broken arm rushed up. The blade was like lightning, tearing a shocking crack in the void. In the saber chi, there was a deathly aura, and it was extremely ruthless, making a sound like ghosts crying and gods howling. Caught off guard, the big black bird was almost hit in the wing by the saber chi. Lin Sun was secretly shocked. This corpse with a broken arm must have been an extremely powerful existence when it was alive. The power of the saber made him feel a stinging pain in his eyes. This was too terrifying. After all, he was now in the third tribulation of longevity, but he actually felt threatened by a corpse that had been dead for countless years. Tut! The big black bird flew into a rage and let out a Sanskrit sound. The dark alms bowl rose into the air, spun, and splashed down a piece of Buddha's light. The corpse with a broken arm wanted to dodge, but it couldn't. It immediately let out a shrill roar, and its whole body was burned by the surging Buddha's light. The power of Buddhism was really born to restrain such dead things. Lin Sun suddenly felt relieved. Kill! Without hesitation, Lin Sun waved the exorcism pestle and rushed up. The exorcism pestle suddenly glowed, sprinkling a string of dense and brilliant Buddhist runes, pouring down like a tide. At the same time, there was a grand Sanskrit chant. Skanda exorcism. This was an inheritance recorded in the Dharma scripture. It required the heart to destroy demons and suppress the world, and the supreme perseverance to activate the Buddha's power. The power produced was also terrifying. Bang! Before a corpse with a broken chest could rush over, it was hit by the exorcism pestle. The whole body flew out and exploded in the air. Then, a nearly transparent figure appeared from the broken sea of consciousness. It bowed to Lin Sun and said, "Thank you, Taoism Peer." As soon as the voice fell, the figure turned into a wisp of pure and translucent qi. This is a wisp of innate qi, an object of merit granted by this city. It's extremely magical. Absorb it quickly. The big black bird shouted to remind Lin Sun. Buzz! Lin Sun reached out his hand and grabbed, and the wisp of innate qi swept into his body. In an instant, Lin Sun only felt that his eyes and ears were clear, and his state of mind and soul were invisible and stable. The most inconceivable thing was that even his own cultivation had improved a little. Even if the improvement was extremely small, it was still very shocking. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly brightened. The bird was right. This city might be a place of great danger for other practitioners. but to them it was an excellent land of fortune. Boom! While thinking, Lin Sun attacked again. At this moment, he had completely let go of himself. His entire body was coiled with a surging Buddhist light, and his appearance was solemn and dignified. He was like a true Buddha that had descended to the world, and his imposing manner was boundless. In his hand, the devil-subduing rod was imposing like a dragon, and it carried great might. It swept up boundless Buddhist light and dispersed the layer upon layer of black mist in the surroundings. Bang, 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 no matter how ferocious the rotting corpses were, under the attack of the Buddhist light, all of them were annihilated one by one, and their bodies were purified. After all, even though these corpses had been dead for countless years, their combat strengths were peerlessly formidable and terrifying to the extreme. It was sufficient to severely threaten a peak figure at the longevity tribulation realm. But now it was like paper. This was called one thing to conquer another. The great scripture of tranquility was written by holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Holy Queen after countless years of deduction and study. The mystery contained in it was far above the earth scripture of the Ksitigarbha temple. At this time, it was used by Lin Sun. The power of Du Yi contained in it naturally had the effect of purging some dead things. I've been in a daze for countless years. Today, I finally wake up and can be free. Thank you, my fellow practitioner. Woo 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 woo. Thank you, my fellow practitioner. All the opponents who were purged by Lin Sun floated away with a kind of relief, leaving behind wisps of congenital clear qi. As Lin Sun refined more and more congenital clear qi, his state of mind, soul, and cultivation were also quietly improving. Although the momentum was extremely slow, it was much faster than practicing in seclusion. On the other side, the big black bird was also attacking with all its strength. Like Lin Sun, its heart was full of joy. After a while, this batch of 56 decaying corpses was all purged by Lin Sun and the big black bird together. For a moment, Lin Sun had a feeling that it was not enough. He could clearly feel that if this continued, in less than 2 hours, his cultivation which was close to the mastery would be completely complete. Moreover, his state of mind and soul were also changing. Fate is too wonderful for words. The big black bird sighed with joy. In this city, the sky was covered with black fog and danger lurked everywhere. It was absolutely a strange and ominous place. But at this time, in the eyes of Lin Sun and the others, this was completely a place of opportunity. Let's go to the center of the city. I have a strong feeling that there must be a great mystery hidden in that place. The big black bird flapped its wings and rushed to the depths of the black fog. Lin Sun followed closely. Regardless of whether it was him or the large black bird, neither of them noticed that the mysterious totem that was branded on some of the buildings in the city would become a little dimmer with every decaying corpse that was trapped here being sent to the afterlife. On the way, Lin Sun and the others encountered batches of decaying corpses rushing out of the black fog. It seemed that all the strange dead things in the whole city were attracted to this place. However, this made Lin Sun and the others happy instead of being surprised. They did not hesitate to kill the corpses and display the inheritance of Buddhism they had mastered at will. An hour later, Lin Sun felt that his cultivation was completely complete. If it went on like this, he suspected that it would not be long before he ushered in the opportunity of the 4th longevity test. However, Lin Sun did not do so. On the way, he collected the congenital clear qi he obtained one by one and sealed it in the wordless tower. In the future, he would choose the right time to break through the realm with the help of the congenital clear qi. Why do I feel that these decaying corpses are getting stronger and stronger? Not long after, Lin Sun suddenly frowned. But have you found that the stronger the decaying corpse is, the more congenital clear qi you get? The big black bird said happily. Lin Sun was stunned and immediately nodded. It was true. At this moment, in the black fog in the distance, a cold and ferocious voice rumbled. Go, kill those 2 outsiders for me. Every word was like a thunder. Lin Sun and the big black bird looked at each other and were shocked. There are decaying corpses with intelligence here. Obviously, this is an extremely terrible guy. We must be careful. The big black bird also became serious and dared not to be careless. Boom! The black fog in the distance suddenly spread to both sides, revealing a scene that made Lin Sun and the big black bird's blood freeze. In the distance, the streets, houses, and even the void were covered by countless decaying corpses. They were so dense that they could not see the end of them at a glance. How about we take a detour? The big black bird swallowed hard. There were so many that it was scared, as if it had encountered a vast army of corpses. However, when Lin Sun and the big black bird planned to take a detour, they were surprised to find that there were decaying corpses rushing towards them from all directions. There was no way to take a detour at all. All of a sudden, even Lin Sun's heart sank and his face became solemn. The enemy was not terrible. What was terrible was that there were too many of them. If they could not break out of the encirclement when they were exhausted, it would be terrible. Keep going to the center of the city. These corpses are obviously under the control of the voice just now. As long as we kill the owner of the voice, we may be able to solve the predicament we are in. Lin Sun made a prompt decision. The big black bird nodded. This was indeed the only way. There was no way out. Boom! The battle continued. Lin Sun and the big black bird, like two sharp awls, killed their way into the enemy's army and broke a gap. However, compared with the joy just now, their mood had become much heavier. Although they obtained more and more congenital clear chi on the way, there was no joy for them anymore. If they could not break out of the current predicament, they were doomed to die no matter how many benefits they obtained. In the field, the corpses were like a tide, constantly being purified. If one looked down from the sky, he would find that there was a crack in the tide-like army. We must not slow down, otherwise, we are doomed to be trapped in the same place and unable to move forward. The big black bird shouted. Those decaying corpses were not afraid of death and kept advancing, which also made them encounter great resistance when they rushed forward. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold and suddenly glowed. He ran his cultivation to the extreme. In an instant, the speed at which he was charging forward had clearly increased by quite a bit. Behind him, he left behind a pile of shattered corpses. Taoism Pier, there is an altar left by the Emperor of Ancient War in the center of the city, but now it is occupied by a ghost king. This siege is also controlled by this ghost king. If you want to get out, you should kill him as soon as possible. After a corpse was purified, an invisible figure appeared and pointed out to Lin Sun. Thank you very much. Lin Sun did not look back and continued to rush forward. The big black bird followed him closely. Taoism Pier, the Ghost King was a great saint named Xiankong before his death. After his death, his heroic soul did not disappear. After being trapped here for countless years, he already has wisdom. He wants to prove his Tao by using corpses and rebuild his way of life. His combat power is extremely terrible. Be careful. Taoism Pier, the Xiankong Ghost King already knows that you are coming. Please leave quickly, otherwise your life may be in danger. On the way, there were corpses being purified from time to time, which also let Lin Sun know the identity of the owner of the voice. A great saint became the Ghost King who controlled this place after his death. He wanted to prove his Tao by using corpses and rebuild his way of life. Thinking about it made people's heart tremble. No matter what, we must kill this Xiankong Ghost King. The big black bird gritted his teeth. The two rushed forward all the way, and in the end they were both injured. The battle was extremely fierce. There were too many decaying corpses, and it was impossible to kill them all. Look, that should be the altar left by the Emperor of Ancient War. After a long time, the big black bird shouted excitedly, "Come on, let's work harder. We are going to get out of here soon." Lin Sun looked up, and his spirit was immediately refreshed. Chapter 1283. In the distance, a 1,000-foot-high altar stood tall. Its whole body was green jade, as clear and sacred as glass. This was the altar left by the ancient war emperor, and it was also the core of this city. However, before Lin Sun and the big black bird could rejoice too early, they saw a majestic figure standing on the altar. Dressed in a black robe, his purple hair was like a waterfall, his facial features were firm and tough, and his style was extremely outstanding. However, his pair of eyes were full of strange death chi, which made people's hair stand on end. Xiankong Ghost King. There was no need to identify his identity at all. Because his aura was too strong, Lin Sun and the big black bird felt a sense of oppression from a distance, almost suffocating them. Oh no! I'm afraid this guy is about to become a sage. The big black bird was stiff and shouted, "Retreat, retreat!" Lin Sun also felt a chill in his heart. He and the big black bird had guessed wrong. They had far underestimated the horror of this Xiankong Ghost King. Facing him was like an ant looking up at a dragon in the sky. How could they compete with him? Go! Without hesitation, he and the big black bird turned around and fled. He finally understood why all the cultivators that had entered the city since yesterday had been unable to return. Just this Xiankong Ghost King was enough to make people desperate. When I was alive, I fought fiercely with sages of 9 regions, killed countless enemies, and won the title of Xiankong Great Sage. The ice-cold and terrifying voice rumbled. There was a strange silence in this world. Those decaying corpses all stopped what they were doing and knelt on the ground, as if they were surrendering. Lin Sun and the big black bird were shocked to find that they were imprisoned by a terrible force, and their bodies stayed in the void, like fish frozen in ice. No matter how they struggled, it was in vain. Both of their faces suddenly became ugly, and their hearts sank to the bottom. Only then did they realize how terrible this Xiankong Ghost King was. In the distance, on the ancient glazed jade altar, Xiankong Ghost King stood upright, like a spear piercing the sky, exuding an unparalleled terrible aura. However, ask yourself honestly, in my entire life, I have never killed an innocent person, nor have I brought disaster to the world. Yet, in the end, I have died in vain here. What kind of injustice is this? The sound was bone-piercing, and heaven and earth were silent. Back then, when the saints of the 8 regions invaded, I stood up immediately and fought to defend the ancient Desolation Realm. How much blood did I shed, and how many wounds did I bear? But now, I've been reduced to a body that's neither human nor ghost, and only a remnant will is left to live on. The world is so heartless, so how can this king not hate it? His voice carried indescribable resentment and hatred, and it caused one's heart to go cold. The expressions of Lin Sun and the big black bird changed constantly. They didn't expect that the Xiankong Great Sage was a great man who fought against the invasion of the 8 regions. Right and wrong, success and failure are all gone in the blink of an eye. However, this king wishes to die but cannot live. For countless years I have been trapped here. Do you know how torturous this is? The Xiankong ghostly king's purple hair danced in the wind. His eyes were filled with the aura of death, and his entire body emitted a violent aura. Obviously, his emotions were extremely unstable. Since that's the case, why don't you surrender and let me release you from hell? The big black bird gritted his teeth and shouted, "In this way, you will be completely free, won't you?" The Xiankong ghostly king's face was cold, and his eyes were like a whirlpool of death. He stared at the big black bird and said, "Release me from hell? When I was alive, I had set foot on the peak of the great sage realm. In this world, except for those who have also set foot on the saint realm, no one else is qualified to release me from hell." These words were extremely conceited. You have your misfortune, but why do you vent your hatred on us? You were a respected great sage when you were alive, but look at you now, what have you become? The big black bird scolded. The Xian Kong Ghost King suddenly raised his head and laughed loudly, but his voice became incomparably cold and indifferent. Back then, after I suffered a calamity and was trapped here, I am no longer me. There is no need for all of you to beg for mercy in this way, but this king will not let any living being that enters this city off. As he spoke, a copious amount of chilling, killing intent spread from his body. Lin Sun and the big blackbird were nervous. Wait a minute. However, before Lin Sun finished speaking, the Xiankong Ghostly King suddenly turned into a purple light, broke through the void and rushed towards Lin Sun. You have a good appearance. When I rebuild the Saint Path, I will use your appearance to kill the world. In the cold and ferocious laughter, the purple light rushed into Lin Sun's body, trying to seize his Tao seed and destroy his soul. From beginning to end, Lin Sun could not move at all, and could only watch all this happen. Boom! He only felt that a violent and fierce force was running around in his body, and he almost lost consciousness. What an amazing soul! It can be divided into 3, each of which controls the past, present, and future. Amazing! The exclamation sounded in the sea of consciousness. Silver, who had been sitting in the sea of consciousness, had long been ready to kill as soon as possible, but he was entangled by a purple light beam, and his body suddenly became stiff. Spirit-eating insect king. I didn't expect that after so many years, I could see such an ancient fierce insect with my own eyes. The Xiankong Ghostly King was amazed. Immediately, he exclaimed, "What a powerful spiritual vein! Is this an inborn talent? Why have I never seen it before?" Lin Sun's heart twitched violently, and he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. At this moment, he felt that all the secrets in his heart were seen through by the old devil. Before long, Lin Sun felt that the place where the Tao seed was located was covered by a cold and fierce force. What kind of Tao seed is this? It is stronger and more magical than the peerless kings I have killed in the past 2 days. The Xiankong Ghostly King's exclamation sounded again. He felt that he was a little out of control. After all, he was a great saint when he was alive, and he had seen all kinds of talents in the world. But now, he was a little unable to control his emotions, because he had seen all the secrets of the young man in front of him, which seemed too incredible. Divine soul, talent, Tao seed. Everything is perfect. Even some born saints are not as good as you. It's really amazing. The Xiankong Ghostly King was very surprised. Originally, he planned to destroy Lin Sun as soon as possible, but now, it seemed that he had found a mysterious treasure house, so he was not in a hurry. It's really incredible. If I let you live with this foundation, if you step into the Saint realm in the future, you will be able to defeat opponents in the same realm and cast the name of the Supreme. The Xiankong Ghostly King was generous with his praise, but the more he praised, the more Lin Sun felt cold. He felt that he was like a fish on the anvil, and he would be slaughtered and devoured by the old devil at any time. At this moment, Lin Sun keenly noticed that the Xiankong Ghostly King's emotions seemed to be severely stimulated, and there were signs of him losing control. Because at this moment, he stared at the wordless pagoda in Lin Sun's body. However, at this moment, his expression was full of shock, trance, excitement, and so on, flickering. In an instant, he seemed to become another person, and he was out of his wits. At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly activated the wordless pagoda with the power of his divine soul. In this absolute domain, once the holy treasure was used, it would be immediately erased. Lin Sun already knew this when he was in the world of burning immortals. But at this moment, he couldn't care about this, and he only used it inside his body, not outside. Whoosh! The wordless pagoda glowed, and the octagonal body of the pagoda, which seemed to be made of colored glaze, emitted a magnificent luster like divine gold, and a black golden light swept out, sweeping towards the Xiankong Ghostly King. Originally, Lin Sun was extremely nervous, with the mentality of staking everything on one throw. But the next scene was completely beyond his expectation. The purple light transformed by the Xiankong ghostly king did not dodge, but stood there in a daze, and was instantly enveloped by the black golden light. But to Lin Sun's surprise, this time, the black golden light failed to take the Xiankong ghostly king into the wordless pagoda. All of a sudden, Lin Sun's heart sank. Even the power of the wordless pagoda couldn't suppress this old devil. How could he fight? Plop! But at this moment, the purple light transformed into the image of the Xiankong ghostly king, who actually knelt under the black golden light and kowtowed to the wordless pagoda, and his resolute and cold face was full of tears. Master, I'm incompetent and trapped here. I can neither live nor die. I've tarnished the reputation of our sect. I'm ashamed of your teachings. He cried bitterly, no longer having the previous cold and violent momentum. Instead, he was like a student who had made a mistake, repenting his mistake. Lin Sun was stunned all of a sudden. Master, did you send my junior fellow apprentice here? Otherwise, why would I see this pagoda today? The Xiankong ghostly king choked with sobs, prostrated on the ground, and spoke with tears. It could be seen that he respected and awed this master to the bone. Lin Sun immediately understood that the existence of the wordless pagoda made Xiankong ghostly king misunderstand. Because of this pagoda, he regarded Lin Sun as his junior fellow apprentice. And judging from this wordless pagoda was very likely to be left by the master of the Xiankong ghostly king. Master, I've been acting according to your teachings when I was alive. When I traveled around the world, although my hands were stained with blood, I had a clear conscience. Only after being trapped here, I could neither live nor die, which caused my temperament to change abruptly and my mind to become muddled. Master, do you know that I've spent every day in torment over the years? There's not a day that I don't want to get out of here, but I've never been able to do so. If possible, I'd rather die in the battle. He talked endlessly as if he was pouring out the depression that had been suppressed in his heart for countless years to his closest elder. In the end, he burst into tears. An existence who had set foot on the peak of the great sage before his death, but now he didn't care about his image at all and cried so sadly, which surprised Lin Sun quite a bit. Master, I know you're no longer here, but I already know what to do. Suddenly, the Xiankong ghostly king got up, took a deep breath, and bowed to Lin Sun. There was a touch of determination between his resolute eyebrows. Lin Sun's heart suddenly tightened again, and his whole body stiffened. What would this old monster do? Chapter 1284. Whoosh! The breath of Xiankong Ghost King swept out of Lin Sun's body. Lin Sun, who was originally tense and stiff, suddenly had a feeling of rebirth after a disaster. What happened before was like a nightmare. Lin Sun, you are not dead, are you? Lin Sun heard the anxious call of the big black bird. Lin Sun turned his head and saw the big black bird staring at him nervously. I'm fine. Lin Sun shook his head and his face was a little stiff. Fellow Taoist, please make way for me. Suddenly, Xiankong Ghost King appeared and looked at the big black bird. Give way? The big black bird was stunned and immediately scolded. I have been imprisoned here by you. How can I give way? It had no choice but to give up. Please! Xiankong Ghost King didn't care about the big black bird. He waved his sleeves, and in an instant, the big black bird was wrapped in a black wind and disappeared from this place. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly shrank. Don't worry, it will be fine. Xiankong Ghost King looked at Lin Sun with a resolute and cold look, but Lin Sun could keenly perceive that his attitude towards him was much softer. In front of the altar, Xiankong Ghost King invited Lin Sun to sit on the ground. At this time, Xiankong Ghost King was no longer fierce. His back was as straight as a spear. Even if he was sitting, he still gave people a feeling of being as unshakable as a mountain. Junior brother, if it weren't for you this time, I'm afraid I would have embarked on a road of no return and completely become a killing maniac. Fortunately, the heavens are fated to allow us to meet here, allowing me to wake up from my endless suffering and hatred." Xiankong Ghost King's eyes were soft, with a trace of open-mindedness and calmness. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun finally dared to believe that the great man in front of him was a great sage who had once shaken the world. "Senior, did you deny the wrong person?" Lin Sun was silent for a moment and finally confessed. He knew that pretending could not deceive such a strong man who had been tempered for a long time. Once he was exposed, the consequences would be more serious, so it was better to confess directly. "I don't recognize the wrong person." Xiankong Ghost King was calm. "The Tower of Tao is an important treasure of our sect. Since it was obtained by you, it is equivalent to being recognized by our master. The great Tao has no end." Lin Sun's heart shook fiercely. In the past, he had always been unaware of the origins of the wordless pagoda. Because this pagoda was branded with the mysterious word Wu, he called it the wordless pagoda. It was only now that he knew the true name of the tower. Without end. But Lin Sun was a little hesitant. "I got this tower by accident, but I never knew its origin." Xiankong Ghost King was taken aback. "You didn't notice the secret hidden in this pagoda before?" Lin shook his head. Up until now, he was only able to utilize the strength of the first level of the wordless pagoda. As for the higher levels, they'd always been sealed by the forbidden energy, and they were utterly not something he could touch. "Then what did you treat this tower as before?" Xiankong Ghost King asked doubtfully. I'm just storing some treasures," Lin Sun answered honestly. Xiankong Ghost King. This kid actually used the Great Tao Endless Tower as a storage treasure. If the other disciples of the sect were to find out about this, they would surely go berserk from anger. It was a complete waste of God's gift. If Master knew about this, would he regret choosing this kid as the fated person? Thinking of Master, Xiankong Ghost King sighed in his heart again, his emotions surging and his thoughts flying. He murmured, "Stepping on the starry Han shoes, strolling up Kunlun, lifting my sleeves to embrace the sun and moon, the heavens enter my palm lines, I came from the mortal world, knocking on the door of longevity, the wonderful method reveals the nature of the heart, the Tao is given to the fated person." Suddenly, Lin Sun's expression became strange. He couldn't be more familiar with this Taoist hymn. Back then, he, Old Toad and Zhao Jingxian entered the Demon Saint's secret realm in the Ultimate Ruins. When they were heading to the core ruins, they inadvertently entered a divine skeleton passage and arrived at a secret realm. It was also in that secret realm, because of the wordless pagoda, that this Taoist hymn appeared and was stored in the wordless pagoda. At that time, Old Toad had also analyzed that this Taoist hymn contained a shocking mystery, and it was very likely to be related to the mystery of the Kunlun ruins. "Have you heard of it?" Xiankong Ghost King asked. Lin Sun nodded. Xiankong Ghost King said happily, "That's right. Every time Master chooses a disciple, he will give this Taoist hymn to him. Junior brother, you probably haven't understood our sect in this life, but it doesn't matter, I can tell you one by one." He paused for a moment before a wisp of an arrogant expression that shot into the sky suddenly appeared between his brows, and his entire body carried peerless pride as he said, "Our sect is called Heart Mountain. At the beginning of the ancient times, everyone in the world called it Heart Mountain. Core Mountain." Lin Sun's heart was in turmoil again, because he had been to the core ruins, and it was also there that he obtained that Taoist hymn and the inheritance of Saint Technique. Our master's Dharma name. Speaking of this, Xiankong Ghost King suddenly stopped and shook his head. Master's Dharma name is like the Great Way, it can be understood by the heart, but not by the will. Junior brother, when you really set foot on the Saint realm, you will understand Master's name. A Dharma name was like the Great Way, it was indescribable. Just how terrifying was his cultivation to be able to possess such majesty. Lin Sun was stunned for a moment. After a long time, he heard Xiankong Ghost King continued to say, Our sect is different from other orthodoxies. Except for Master, other disciples, no matter when they join the sect, call each other brothers and sisters. Before me there were 48 senior brothers and sisters, some practicing Zen, some practicing Buddhism, some practicing spiritual, and some practicing swordsmanship. Xiankong Ghost King looked nostalgic, as if he remembered a period of time when he was cultivating in the sect. Unfortunately, I was the most unworthy. In those years when I left the sect to travel, limited by my intelligence and state of mind, I barely stepped into the peak of the great sage realm. Lin Sun was speechless for a while. The peak of the great sage realm. Looking at the whole world, it was also a domineering and lawless figure. But in Xiankong Ghost King's words, he felt ashamed in this way. How terrifying were the cultivation of the 48 senior brothers and sisters who were ranked before Xiankong Ghost King? In short, I am ranked 49th, and you are the 50th successor of Core Mountain. Speaking of this, Xiankong Ghost King frowned. 50th? There are 50 great ways, 49 heavenly evolutions, and one of them is missing. Is there a trace of cause and effect? For a moment, his expression was uncertain, and he fell into silence. But Lin Sun, like an outsider, listened to these secrets, but felt very ethereal and unreal. He'd never imagined that he'd inadvertently become an inheritor of an ancient sect, and this seemed to be too inconceivable. It made him a little stunned for a moment, and it was difficult for him to digest. Senior, actually. Lin Sun finally couldn't help but speak. But before he finished, he was interrupted by Xiankong Ghost King. Junior brother, you and I can call each other brother. Don't be too rigid. Master often said that there is no seniority in learning Tao. If we are in the same sect, we are the same. Lin Sun smiled bitterly in his heart and said, Senior brother, to tell you the truth, when I was young, I was fortunate to enter a secret realm of Core Mountain, where I obtained the inheritance of Battle Saint Method, but Xiankong Ghost King clapped his hands and laughed. That's right, Battle Saint Method is indeed one of the 9 methods of our Core Mountain. Immediately, he was stunned and said with a strange look, I suddenly remembered that in the sect, besides you, there is only one other senior brother who is qualified to obtain the inheritance of Battle Saint Method. Who? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and asked. In his heart, he thought of a shocking scene when he received the inheritance of Battle Saint Method that year. It was a dilapidated ruin. Holy mountains had collapsed, palaces had collapsed, and all the ancient buildings had been turned into ruins and dust. It should have been a blessed place, but no one knew what kind of disaster it had experienced, but it turned into a piece of scorched earth, and the ground was full of rubble. On the broken mountain, there were some fragmented vague ancient Taoist runes, crescent, 3 stars. In front of the ancient mountain gate, there stood a figure, with his back to all living beings, like a statue, facing the dilapidated ruins in silence and motionless. Although his face couldn't be seen clearly, his breath was as vast as the sky, unruly and terrifying. It seemed that as long as he wanted, he could sweep through the 9 heavens and 10 earths, kill everything in the world, and fight unparalleled. Just like a war dominator. But in the end, this figure knelt in front of the dilapidated mountain gate, and kowtowed 3 times without saying a word. Then, there were thousands of thunder strikes, like gods and devils coming to the world, covering the world, and the terrible breath crushed the sky. The unruly figure stood up, and a fighting force broke out, rushing to the sky. His arrogant and disdainful posture was like a ray of light, illuminating the world. The scene ended here, but Lin Sun still clearly remembered the terrible fighting force that was enough to make the gods tremble. Was he the senior brother mentioned by Xiankong Ghost King? Xiankong Ghost King opened his mouth and suddenly sighed. Let's not mention the past. When you become a saint in the future, you will understand the secrets of the past. Lin Sun felt a little inexplicable sense of loss. When he was in the core ruins, he admired that figure very much, and his mind was completely shocked and amazed. Looking back at that time, it seemed that he witnessed an unruly figure fighting all the way from the 9th secluded land, killing above the 9th heaven, killing mountains of corpses and seas of blood along the way, burying all the enemies. He was really crazy and unparalleled. If the sky obstructed him, he would tear it apart. If the earth restrained him, he would trample on it. Junior brother, the things of the past have already sunk into the eons. Unfortunately, I don't have much time left. You only need to remember that as long as the Great Tao Bottomless Tower exists, the inheritance of our Fang Siyuan bloodline will continue. And when you become a saint in the future, you will naturally understand what you should understand. Speaking of this, Xiankong Ghost King looked at Lin Sun with clear eyes. As for now, can you let me see your Tao and Dharma? Lin Sun's heart moved, and he immediately abandoned the distracting thoughts in his mind. He knew that this was Xuankong's test and guidance. P.S. Thank you He Meng and Shinkai Copper for your gifts and monthly ticket. In addition, this chapter is a little informative, which is one of the foreshadowing buried before. It is described in the plot of chapter 613 or so. If you are interested, you can read it according to the plot. Also, today is 2 consecutive chapters. Chapter 1285. Senior brother, please. Please. In front of the altar, 2 figures intertwined and the battle broke out. The simplest way to test and guide a person's cultivation was to fight. That was the case now. Xiankong Ghost King was a great sage who conquered the world before his death. His cultivation had been so long that it was impossible to find out. Although he had lost the cultivation he had when he was alive, with his cultivation experience and knowledge, it was more than enough for him to guide a saint in their cultivation. Lin Sun also understood this. This was definitely a rare and precious opportunity. After all, since he started cultivating until now, he'd practically always relied on himself to seek the Tao. Boom! Lin Sun completely broke out and tried his best. The light around him roared like a demon, and he deduced all the Tao and Dharma he had mastered. For example, the 9 strikes of shaking heaven, the 9 changes of calamity dragon, the 6 strikes of sky. The first 2 moves of the great divination finger were the twinkling of spring and autumn and the world apart. As he deduced the power of martial arts, he also displayed the great Tao profundities such as water, fire, dragon, immortality, and Tai Chi. For a time, the sound of Tao was roaring, strange phenomena appeared, and the fighting spirit soared to the sky. But, no matter what magic method Lin Sun used or what great Tao profundities he used, they were all destroyed by Xiankong Ghost King. His figure was straight like a spear, and his movements were casual. His resolute and cold face was meticulous without any emotion. At first, Lin Sun still had some expectations to get some recognition and praise from Xiankong Ghost King, or criticism and correction. Unfortunately, there was none. During the battle, Xiankong Ghost King seemed to become another person. He was serious, solemn, meticulous, and focused without saying a word. Seeing this, Lin Sun completely let go of his hands and feet. He didn't think about anything else, got rid of distracting thoughts, emptied his mind and body, and went all out to kill. Boom! The battle became more and more terrible. Without any reservation, Lin Sun also operated the fury of Yazi and battle saint method to the extreme. His body, mind, and spirit were all engaged in the battle. It was no exaggeration to say that in other places, few people of the same generation could resist Lin Sun's killing. Ming Child was strong enough, but he was suppressed by Lin Sun. The doppelganger of ancient Buddha was also extremely powerful, but it was also resolved by Lin Sun. However, all of his attacks were nullified by the Xiankong Ghost King. If other cultivators were to witness this scene, their jaws would surely hit the floor from shock. But only those that had truly witnessed Ghost King Xiankong's ability would understand that Ghost King Xiankong's grasp of the martial Tao had long since attained the state of seizing all fortune and turning something ordinary into something extraordinary. Every single move was executed in a casual and natural manner, Yet they were filled with profound and unfathomable might, and they were always able to destroy all attacks in the slightest. Lin Sun didn't even touch his clothes. If it was anyone else, perhaps that person would have been discouraged a long time ago and admitted defeat. Because it was like facing an immovable mountain, and no matter how one attacked it, it would be utterly useless, and it caused one to feel despair. But Lin didn't. He had already completely immersed himself in the battle, forgetting about the heavens, the earth, and the people. It had been a very long time since he'd released his strength so wantonly and to the extreme, nor had he slaughtered so purely like this. This feeling caused his vital blood to burn, his battle intent to boil, and it was extremely satisfying. His black eyes became brighter and brighter, and his mind became more and more calm and ethereal. Vaguely, his understanding of fighting and martial Tao was rapidly improving. The Xian Kong Ghost King's expression was as resolute and cold as before, and it was as calm as an ancient well. But in his heart there were some ripples. In other words, from the beginning of the battle, junior brother Lin Sun in front of him had brought him surprises and surprises. Lin Sun's control of martial Tao, the use of Tao, as well as his experience in fighting, were completely beyond his expectations. It was hard to imagine that a person in the third retribution of the longevity realm could have such a terrifying foundation and combat strength. When the Xian Kong Ghost King was seeking the Tao of longevity, he had also fought with the geniuses and monstrous figures of the same era. However, if he compared them one by one, no one could be as strong as Lin Sun. This kind of strength came from his overall combat strength. Martial Tao, cultivation, Tao power, fighting experience. None of them could be missing. As the battle continued, the Xian Kong Ghost King was also surprised to find that the combat strength shown by junior brother Lin Sun in front of him was also becoming more and more tyrannical. Every time he thought that this was already his limit, the next moment, he would become stronger again, breaking your cognition and speculation, and always beyond your expectations. He was just like a little monster that defied the natural order. The Xian Kong Ghost King suddenly remembered that when he was cultivating in the sect, there were only a few senior brothers and sisters who could be as powerful as junior brother Lin Sun when they were at the same cultivation level. The peerless king realm is really extraordinary, the Xian Kong Ghost King secretly sighed. When Lin Sun displayed the devouring Star Wei and attacked with the impermanence cut, the Xian Kong Ghost King was careless and was almost swept by the sharp edge. A piece of clothes was torn, fluttering like a butterfly, and then shattered. At this moment, the Xian Kong Ghost King withdrew from the battle and said, "Junior brother, it's enough." Lin Sun was startled, and then he woke up from that extremely pure state of fighting, and the aura around him converged like a tide. And he couldn't help but gasp. Although this battle only lasted less than 30 minutes, it was the most unreserved battle since he started cultivating. Naturally, the consumption was also extremely great. Junior brother, your talent and foundation can be ranked in the top 5 amongst all the geniuses I've seen in my life. The Xian Kong Ghost King made an evaluation. Ranked in the top 5. In the past experience of a peerless great sage, he had seen many influential figures, and in terms of foundation and talent, it was already of very high praise to be ranked in the top 5. With your current combat power, you should be able to easily kill an ordinary king in the 5th tribulation of longevity. The Xian Kong Ghost King analyzed. Lin Sun listened silently. But do you know, although your strength and foundation are unparalleled, you waste too much unnecessary power in the battle, and you can only use 70% of your foundation at most. As soon as the words came out, Lin Sun was shocked, and then he cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother, please give me some advice." "It's not advice, I just want you to understand how to dig your strength to the extreme, and then completely deduce your combat power to the extreme." As he spoke, the Xian Kong Ghost King punched out. It was plain, direct, and simple. But in Lin Sun's eyes, this punch seemed to break the shackles of time and space, and it came through the long river of time, with a kind of momentum that made people feel small and pale. In an instant, he felt cold all over, as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and there was no way to escape, and even his mind and fighting spirit were under terrible pressure and began to waver. The Great Way is simple, and so is the martial way. Everything is true, just like in a battle. Get rid of the weeds and keep the essence, and only leave a touch of the essence, so that you can be successful and break everything, the Xian Kong Ghost King said in a deep voice. With his experience and knowledge when he was alive, as soon as he opened his mouth, Lin Sun felt a sense of enlightenment. What the Xian Kong Ghost King taught him was not specific Tao and Dharma, but how to save physical strength and exert the strongest power with the least amount of power. At the same time, he was also pointing out how to dig out his potential and use it in the battle. Lin Sun could occasionally realize these problems in the past, but he had never really understood and pondered deeply. But at this time, the teaching of the Xian Kong Ghost King was equivalent to being enlightened, which made him feel as if he had pierced through the window paper and saw a whole new world. Attack this stone with all your strength. The Xian Kong Ghost King stretched out his hand, and an old black stone tablet appeared and was inserted into the ground. Lin Sun took a deep breath, urged his strength to the extreme, and punched out. On the stone tablet there was a 3-inch deep fist mark. The material of this stone tablet was obviously unusual. In my opinion, you wasted a lot of strength in this punch, and you didn't fully exert your combat power. The Xian Kong Ghost King commented, "Do you remember my punch just now?" Lin Sun nodded. "Now, I will explain the mystery of this punch to you." The Xian Kong Ghost King treated Lin Sun as his junior brother, and taught him everything he knew without reservation. And Lin Sun seized the time to comprehend. Unknowingly, an hour passed. Lin Sun got up and punched again. This time, he left a 5-inch deep fist mark on the stone tablet. His progress was obvious, but in his heart there was a wave. In the past, he always thought that he had deduced his combat power to the extreme and that he could be fearless of all his peers. But now, he found that he was wrong. For example, this punch used less than 80% of the strength just now, but the power achieved was about twice that of the previous punch. A butcher can easily dismember a whole cow without any effort. The reason is that the skill is close to the Tao. This Tao is the understanding of the true meaning of martial arts. Under the guidance of the Xian Kong Ghost King, 6 hours later, Lin Sun punched out, and the stone tablet turned into powder and scattered on the ground. Yes, you have comprehended some of its mysteries. The Tao is the simplest. As long as you master its true meaning and follow its Tao, you can exert the greatest power of your strength. A smile appeared on the Xian Kong Ghost King's face. In fact, he was quite amazed that Lin Sun could comprehend the true meaning of martial arts in just a few hours, which was completely beyond his expectation. Junior brother, this is the spirit-connecting realm of martial arts. Even if there are thousands of secret skills and tens of thousands of wonderful methods, as long as you understand the spirit, you can be successful. The spirit-connecting realm. In the past, Lin Sun's understanding of martial arts was only to seek the realm of my way. My way was the heaven. Above it was the spirit-connecting realm, where you could get a little spirit of Tao and use it for your own use. Martial arts could reach the spirit-connecting realm. What was the spirit-connecting realm? It was the meaning of reaching the spirit-connecting realm in martial art. Now, I will teach you how to dig out all your strength and deduce your combat power to the extreme, the Xian Kong Ghost King said. Lin Sun immediately calmed down and listened quietly. I have to go out in the evening, so I can only update 2 times today. There are only 2 updates left, which will be made up in the next few days. Chapter 1286. People, under the stimulation of excessive shock or death, often burst out far beyond the ordinary potential. What Xian Kong Ghost King taught Lin Sun was how to make full use of this potential in ordinary battles. In short, this method was nothing more than 4 words: thrilling. Let the state of mind and soul be fully mobilized in the battle, just like cultivation, so as to achieve a state of full outbreak. Under the stimulation of death, one's heart and soul will be greatly affected. Some people will feel hopeless and disheartened because of this. But there are some people who can shine with unprecedented fighting spirit and erupt with battle power that far surpasses ordinary people. For example, speaking of this, Xiankong Ghost King suddenly rushed out with a sharp blade in his palm. In an instant, he stabbed Lin Sun's throat. Fast. Incredibly fast. From the beginning to the end, there was no hesitation. Lin Sun's hair stood on end, his heart was in suspense, and his soul was palpitating. He had no doubt that this blow of Xiankong Ghost King was enough to kill him easily, like the shadow of death. Retreat. At the same time, the desire to survive was stimulated, so that Lin Sun mobilized all the strength of his body. His whole body was like a full bowstring suddenly released. With a swoosh, he retreated rapidly. That's what you call thrilling. Xiankong Ghost King put away the sharp blade and looked at Lin Sun in the distance. Carefully experience what happened just now. If you can understand the mystery, you can dig your strength to the extreme. The wound in Lin Sun's throat quietly healed and recovered. He stood there in a daze, lost in thought. There was great horror between life and death. Under such a terrifying stimulation, everyone would inevitably be caught off guard and frightened. But at the same time, this kind of stimulation could stimulate one's own potential. Why was it that every time he experienced an incomparably dangerous and bloody battle in the past, his battle prowess would improve so significantly? It was because fighting could hone one's own Tao and law, which could make up for the shortcomings and further improve oneself. But more importantly, in a life and death fight, one's own potential would be further released and turned into a part of one's strength. Lin Sun understood this in an instant. Then, he began to recall the scene he had just experienced. A series of movements when he was suddenly assassinated, like a series of frozen pictures, appeared in his mind. No, that's not it. Lin Sun realized that there was no mystery in those pictures. The key was that his consciousness, instinct, and chi reacted at the first time under the assassination. If he could capture these details, he might be able to unravel the true mystery of stimulating one's potential. One day later, Lin Sun woke up from his deep thoughts. "Senior brother, please." "All right." Strangely enough, Lin Sun's combat power would occasionally burst out far more accurate than usual during the battle. But in the eyes of Xiankong Ghost King, Lin Sun had begun to touch the real mystery of releasing all his potential. However, it was not stable and could not be maintained. After a fierce battle, Lin Sun was sweating profusely and panting. He sat down on the ground in exhaustion. But his pair of deep black eyes became unusually bright. In his mind, he had vaguely captured that incomparably mysterious state. He could not care about anything else and fell into deep thought. Another 2 days passed. Lin Sun took a deep breath, stood up and said, "Senior brother, thank you for your trouble. Please." The battle broke out again. This time, Lin Sun's cultivation did not change, but his combat power was obviously different. It was as if he had been reborn and was much stronger than before. Only occasionally, his combat power would suddenly decline a lot and return to its previous normal state. Xiankong Ghost King's eyes had a touch of gratification. This latest junior brother was really talented. In just 3 days, he had already discovered the real mystery of tapping his potential. Although he was still a little far from mastering it, it was only a matter of time. "Junior brother, your path of cultivation is different from mine. I can no longer teach you," Xiankong Ghost King said. Lin Sun was stunned and immediately felt deeply grateful. He bowed and saluted. "Thank you for your guidance, senior brother." Whether it was guiding Lin Sun to reach the spirit realm in martial arts or practicing the method to tap his potential, Xiankong Ghost King was extremely attentive. He taught Lin Sun everything he knew without reservation. How could Lin Sun not be grateful? Junior brother, this kind of secret method to tap potential is called eternity without leakage by the ancient powerful figures, which means to release the limit without any omission. Xiankong Ghost King reminded, don't use this method frequently unless it's a life and death battle, so as to avoid falling into a desperate situation when your physical strength is exhausted. Lin Sun nodded. This method of releasing the limit was indeed very magical and terrible, but at the same time, he also realized that it consumed a lot of physical strength, so it was impossible to fight for a long time. Come with me, Xiankong Ghost King said, and took Lin Sun to the altar of 1,000 feet. The altar was like a green jade glass, covered with dense patterns, showing the vicissitudes of life. At the top of the altar, there was a collapsed and cracked table. It could be clearly seen that the surface of the table was engraved with obscure and complicated Taoist text. To Lin Sun's surprise, he knew all those Taoist texts, but when they were combined, he was confused and didn't know what to make of them. The land of the tragic death is actually a fragment of a saint artifact. This saint artifact is called the City of the Tragic Death, and it's a natural object. The reason it was destroyed is related to the War of the 9 Regions that occurred in ancient times. Xiankong Ghost King's expression was complicated, with hatred, sorrow, and emotion. If it weren't for this land of tragic death, my remnant soul would have been annihilated in the world. But it is also because of this land of tragic death that I suffer all kinds of hardships and tortures. I can neither live nor die. Speaking of this, Xiankong Ghost King's expression had returned to calmness, and he said, originally, I wanted to prove my Tao by using a corpse and rebuild the way of Tao when I was alive. But if I do so, my will be obliterated and I will become a monster that is neither human nor ghost nor demon. Instead, I would rather choose to sleep here. His voice was low and decisive. Lin Sun's mood was also complicated for a while. He couldn't imagine the helplessness and pain of a great sage's remnant soul being trapped here when he died. He also couldn't imagine what kind of suffering he had been through for countless years. But he was sure that this feeling was enough to make most strong people collapse. Xiankong Ghost King said, Junior brother, do me a favor. The reason why this land of tragic death can survive until now is that there is a natural clarity pearl buried under it. This thing is the origin of the City of Tragic Death. As long as I take it away, I can be free. Free. Lin Sun had a bad feeling. Senior brother, is there no other way? The Xiankong Ghostly King smiled and said with a carefree expression, that's all. The existence of the City of the Wronged was originally for the sake of expiating souls. Unfortunately, the City of the Wronged was destroyed all those years ago, and only this land of the wronged was left. It lost the power of expiation. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have been freed from this place a long time ago. I can find a way, Lin Sun said seriously. He had only known Xiankong for a few days, but he was completely subdued by Xiankong's character and personality charm. Deep in his heart, he didn't want to see Xiankong disappear like this. Xiankong patted Lin Sun on the shoulder and said in a gentle voice, I can't wait. If you didn't come this time, I'm afraid I would have become a monster. Fortunately, God opened his eyes and let us meet here. Even if we disappear completely, I will have no regrets in my heart. Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of something, took out a light green bamboo leaf-shaped jade pendant, and handed it to Lin Sun. In the future, if you have a chance to see the clansmen of the Jiang clan of the imperial family, return this thing and tell them that it belongs to Jiang Xingxue. An imperceptible tenderness appeared in Xiankong's eyes, but it was immediately replaced by sadness and loss. Lin Sun held the jade pendant firmly and nodded. Don't worry, senior brother. No matter where I go, I'll definitely return this to the Jiang clan. Xiankong smiled, and then he pointed at the obscure and indescribable Tao scripture on the table and said, Junior brother, I'll try my best to unseal this scripture later. You must seize this opportunity to take that natural clarity pearl, and then leave this place as soon as possible. Senior brother. Lin Sun opened his mouth with the intention of speaking, yet Xian Kong had already waved his hand and said, "There's no need to say anything further. I've already made my decision." Bang! In the next moment, he'd already grabbed a Tao scripture on the table, and a terrifying glow of the Tao rumbled and resounded amidst the collision. Crack! Crack! The Tao scripture was actually being grabbed inch by inch, but at the same time, Xian Kong seemed to be enduring unimaginable pain, and his expression had warped and become savage. Right at this moment, Lin Sun noticed that a bottomless cave had been revealed beneath the altar, and an expanse of clear light sprayed out from within it. It was magnificent and vast. It was actually the clear qi of the Grand Tao. Quickly attack! Xian Kong shouted loudly while a terrifying aura of death appeared once more in his eyes, and his entire face warped like a ferocious ghost. Swoosh! Lin Sun charged into the cave without the slightest hesitation. After a short moment, Lin Sun returned safely. However, there was a clear and translucent pearl that was the size of a pigeon egg in his hand, and it flowed with chaotic qi and was enshrouded in the glow of the Tao. It was extremely miraculous. "Junior brother, leave quickly!" Xian Kong howled like a wild beast that was on the verge of collapse, and the veins on his forehead bulged. "Remember to refine this pearl into your body. You absolutely must not allow anyone to see it." Lin Sun glanced at Xian Kong before he gritted his teeth fiercely, and then he turned around and flashed towards the distance. Roar! A wave of peerlessly miserable howls resounded from behind him. Lin Sun turned around and saw Xian Kong's violet hair fluttering violently on the altar while his entire body was enveloped by a layer of black mist. He was like a ferocious god of ghosts, and he seemed extremely savage and terrifying. "Senior brother." Lin Sun felt slightly suffocated while his heart surged without end, and he forcefully restrained his impulse to return. "Junior brother, take care of yourself." Xian Kong's voice sounded out from within the black mist. It was urgent, hoarse, exhausted, and carried an unprecedented feeling of relief. When Lin Sun looked over once more, the black mist on the altar surged, and Xian Kong's figure was nowhere to be seen. He was a peaked great saint that commanded the heavens and the earth while he was still alive. For the sake of defending the ancient desolation domain against the enemies of the 8 regions, he'd shed all his blood, and he'd lived and died without any regrets. Yet now, after being trapped for countless years, this strand of his incomplete soul had been completely freed from the state of being unable to live or die. P.S. There will be 2 chapters and a supplementary chapter tonight. Please refresh and read the next 2 chapters. Chapter 1287. A few days later, the number of cultivators outside the land of the tragic death increased instead of decreasing. But very few people dared to enter rashly. They were all waiting, because they could see that this city was extremely mysterious. Sometimes it was sacred like the legendary Divine City, and sometimes it was ghastly and terrifying like a ghost realm. How could there be no opportunity here? But because all the experts that had entered the city in the past few days had perished, it caused all the cultivators that were gathered outside the city to not dare make a move arbitrarily. Boom! Suddenly, the world shook and attracted the attention of everyone. In the distant city, the rolling black mist dissipated, and the strange aura that enveloped the city began to disperse rapidly. "Here's our chance." Many people's eyes lit up. "Charge!" Immediately, many experts couldn't restrain themselves and rushed into the city. For a time, the scene was extremely chaotic. Amidst the chaos, Lin Sun and the big black bird returned from the city at an extremely fast speed. "What on earth have you experienced these days?" On the way, the big black bird couldn't help asking. As soon as Lin Sun thought of senior brother Xian Kong, who was completely free, he felt an indescribable sadness in his heart and said, "Forget it." The big black bird noticed that Lin Sun was in a bad mood, so he didn't ask any more questions. However, as soon as they rushed to the city gate, someone exclaimed, "Hey, this man and bird entered the city a few days ago, but they are still alive." In an instant, Lin Sun and the big black bird noticed that some people were looking at them with suspicion. They ignored them and walked out of the city gate. This seemed a little unusual in the eyes of other cultivators. Others rushed into the city in search of opportunities, but these two guys ran in the opposite direction and intended to leave as soon as possible. "Friend, is there something wrong in the city? Why don't you stay and talk to us?" A skinny man's eyes flickered as he stood in front of the city gate. Bang! With a muffled sound, the skinny man was knocked flying by Lin Sun's figure before he could react. Blood sprayed from his mouth and nose, and he screamed miserably. "You're asking to be humiliated," the big blackbird sneered. Lin Sun was obviously in a bad mood at the moment, but this guy still dared to provoke him. Was he tired of living? "Hurry up, stop these two guys. They must have obtained unspeakable benefits in the city." The skinny man gritted his teeth and roared resentfully. In fact, he was not sure about this at all. What he said was nothing more than to shift the blame to Lin Sun. As expected, some cultivators were tempted. Everyone else was entering the city, but these two fellows were in a hurry to leave. According to others, these two fellows had already entered the city a few days ago, so how could they not have obtained some benefits? It was inevitable that people's imagination would run wild. "Someone is following us." After they left the city, it wasn't long before the black bird noticed that some cultivators were following them in the shadows, and they obviously had ill intentions. "Ignore him. Lead the way. We're going to find ancient Buddha's true self." Lin Sun didn't look back. Of course he noticed it, but he didn't care. The big black bird nodded. "Friend, please wait a moment. We would like to learn more about the city from you. I hope you can enlighten us." A cold voice rang out. The words were very polite, but a fiery red net suddenly fell from the sky, trying to bind Lin Sun and the big black bird. It was a black-robed young man, who was obviously of extraordinary origin and extremely powerful in combat. He was followed by a group of retainers. Lin Sun didn't look back, nor did he dodge. Only a layer of Taoist light appeared on his body, like a sharp blade. With a swish, the fiery red net was torn apart in an instant, and a rain of light was flying. But this didn't frighten the black-robed young man. Instead, he sneered, "I didn't expect you to be a master. You destroyed my treasure and still want to leave? Stay here." Before his voice died away, he had already broken through the air and slashed out a long green sword in his hand, shooting out a sword chi of thousands of meters long, which was as brilliant as the blue sun. Lin Sun suddenly stopped, and his black eyes were terrifyingly cold. He turned around and reached out his hand. The green sword chi, like a snake caught at its weak point, collapsed inch by inch in Lin Sun's palm, and turned into a green rain of light. The black-robed young man's pupils shrank, and he felt cold all over. He knew very well how terrible his sword was, but now it was easily crushed by Lin Sun. This undoubtedly proved that Lin Sun's combat power was far above his own. Retreat. Without hesitation, the black-robed young man turned around and fled. With a cold look, Lin Sun flicked his fingers gently, and the body of the black-robed young man thousands of meters away suddenly burst into pieces, turning into a rain of blood and disappearing. In a flash, he was turned into ashes. The retainers of the black-robed young man were all stunned. What kind of terrible enemy did they provoke because of a trace of greed? Whoever is not convinced can catch up with me. Lin Sun's black eyes glanced around. In the dark, some practitioners who had followed Lin Sun were extremely nervous and had a chill on their back. When his voice fell, Lin Sun had set off again. The scene of killing the black-robed young man was like a blow to the mountain, so no one dared to follow him in the following time. Rumble. Before long, the extremely magnificent ancient city in the land of the tragic death collapsed with a bang and vanished in the void. For a time it caused countless exclamations. They originally thought it was a place of opportunity, but who would have expected that it would vanish before they could explore it? Lin Sun didn't look back, and he felt even more disappointed in his heart. He knew that he probably wouldn't be able to see senior brother Xian Kong again in his life. Buzz. Right at this moment, a strange dark blue treasured ship suddenly appeared in front of Lin Sun and the big black bird, as if it had moved through the void. Is it them? A silver-robed young man stood on the treasured ship with a calm expression as he gazed at Lin Sun and the big black bird. His body was coiled with silver divine radiance, and he had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He seemed extraordinary. Beside him, a gray-robed man was drenched in sweat, and he stammered, "Yes, it's them. I saw them enter that mysterious city with my own eyes a few days ago." Bang! The silver-robed young man waved his sleeve and expelled the gray-robed man, and the gray-robed man was thrown into the distance as if he was driving away a fly. When they witnessed this scene, Lin Sun and the big black bird instantly understood what was going on. It was none other than for the sake of stopping them and seizing the fortune they obtained. The big black bird was infuriated to the point it hurt. Since it entered the city, it hadn't obtained any fortune besides some natural qi. Yet now, it was targeted and taken to be a fat sheep, so how could it not be infuriated? "Kid, you intend to obstruct our path and rob us?" The big black bird spoke coldly. "Rob? Wrong, it's too unpleasant to hear. I just want to ask the two of you to offer up the fortune you obtained from the city to me." The silver-robed young man had an indifferent expression. His figure was thin and wasn't tall, yet he emanated an oppressive aura of valiance, and he didn't care about Lin Sun and the others. "Offer it up to you?" The big black bird started laughing from extreme rage. "Who gave you the courage to play dumb in front of me? My young master is the heir of the heavenless sect, Shuejixian. I advise the two of you not to act presumptuously. Be careful of careless talk." On the deep blue treasure ship, a well-dressed woman spoke coldly with an aloof expression. Their young master was born with a fighting soul body and was extremely talented. Now, he was at the peak of the fourth retribution of the longevity realm. His Taoist sword was invincible, and he had killed many of his peers. Now, he was already a famous immortal giant in the upper 9 realms. He had a brilliant battle record and was ranked 39th on the Heaven's Golden List. The Prodigy Gold Roll wasn't something that just anyone could leave their name on. Especially in the upper 9 realms, those who were ranked 100th on the Heaven's Golden List all had the combat power of the third retribution of the longevity realm. It could be said that their young master was definitely one of the most powerful immortal giants in the upper 9 realms. The Heavenless Sect? Lin Sun frowned and remembered that Lu Kaiwei, who was on good terms with him, was from the Heavenless Sect of Mysterious Spirit Mountain. "It's not too late to be afraid now. I advise you to offer up your fortune quickly. Maybe my young master will let you off this time," the pretty woman said with slight complacency and disdain. "Ridiculous. Which eye of yours thinks that we are afraid of him? How arrogant you are to let us off this time. Disappear before we get angry." The big black bird's face darkened. "You should know Lu Kaiwei. She and I are friends. For her sake, I won't haggle with you. Now, get out of my way." Lin Sun was already in a low mood. Now he was being obstructed and threatened like this, which made him extremely unhappy. If it weren't for his old friend Lu Kaiwei, he would have already taken action. You said you know Lu Kaiwei?" Suddenly, a low voice sounded from the treasure ship. Then, a figure walked out. This man had a dignified appearance, long light cyan hair, and a pair of eyes intertwined with blazing flames, which was extremely frightening. Just by standing there casually, there was a sharpness that seemed to be unparalleled in this world. Seeing the young man appear, the pretty woman hurriedly stepped aside and saluted. "Senior Brother Yang, I didn't expect that you would be alarmed." But Senior Yang didn't pay attention to her. He looked at Lin Sun as soon as he appeared, with some surprise on his face. "It's you." There was a touch of coldness in his expression. At the same time, Lin Sun also raised his eyebrows and recognized him. He said calmly, "I didn't expect to meet you here." This man was Yang Tianqi. When Lin Sun and Lu Kaiwei crossed the boundary river and arrived at Green Flame City in Dongxing World, they had met Yang Tianqi once. At that time, Yang Tianqi appeared with an old man named Ku Jing. They came to Green Flame City to take Lu Kaiwei back to the sect. However, Lin Sun had an extremely bad impression of this man. He would never forget that this man suddenly attacked him just because he didn't like him. He said that he wanted to test his ability, but in fact, he was extremely ruthless. At that time, if the old man Ku Jing didn't stop him, Lin Sun would never mind giving him an unforgettable lesson. The funny thing was that Yang Tianqi had sent him a voice transmission to warn him before he left. Lin Sun still remembered the undisguised threat in those words. Chapter 1288. You'd better remember that you're not worthy of Junior Sister Lu. If you dare to pester Junior Sister Lu again, I'll kill you myself. Lin Sun would never forget this sentence. Not to mention that he had never had any thoughts about Lu Kaiwei, even if he had, so what? At that time, Lin Sun remembered Yang Tianqi. If it was just a threat, Lin Sun wouldn't care about it. There were too many people who had threatened him in this world. Yang Tianqi wouldn't make a difference. The point was that this person had attacked him extremely rudely. Lin Sun was not so generous that he didn't care about being attacked by others. However, after so many years, Lin Sun didn't expect to meet Yang Tianqi again at this time. At the same time, Yang Tianqi's heart was full of killing intent. He wouldn't forget that when he tried to suppress Lin Sun, Lu Kaiwei almost fell out with him. Since then, Lu Kaiwei's attitude towards him had been lukewarm after she returned to the sect, which made him hate Lin Sun more and more. Because everyone in the Heavenless sect knew that he had been pursuing Lu Kaiwei since he was young and regarded her as his lifelong cultivation companion. Lin Sun's appearance naturally became a thorn in Yang Tianqi's side. He thought that after all these years, it was very likely that he would not see this hateful guy again. Who would have thought that this was not the case? This fellow had actually become the world-famous demon god Lin. Over these years, Yang Tianqi clearly remembered that whenever there was news about Lin Sun, Lu Kaiwei would pay special attention to it. How could Yang Tianqi feel comfortable about this? Now that he finally met Lin Sun, Yang Tianqi only had one thought: to eradicate this thorn in his side. Junior brother Yang, do you know this person? At the bow, Shui Zhixian was a little surprised. But he also saw that Yang Tianqi's attitude towards Lin Sun was very cold, even with a trace of killing intent. It was like meeting enemies, eyes burning with hatred. Yang Tianqi said coldly with no expression on his face. He is Lin Sun, an influential figure in the upper 9 realms. He defeated Mingzi and suppressed Gu Fouzi. Lin Sun. Shui Zhixian was startled for a moment before bursting into laughter. What a coincidence! This time, I actually caught a big fish by accident. Obviously, he had also heard of Lin Sun, but he was not afraid. On the contrary, he was excited as if he was staring at a prey. Big fish? I think he's about to become a dead fish. Yang Tianqi said coldly. Dao light flowed around his body, and his vital energy and blood surged like an ocean. Along with the appearance of his killing intent, this entire region of heaven and earth began to tremble and rumble, matching the might of his body. This was the embodiment of one's cultivation being profound, one's cultivation being extraordinary, and one's own strength reaching an extreme level. In terms of aura, he was on par with Shui Zhixian. That was indeed the case. Even though Yang Tianqi was arrogant and conceited, he was still a longevity giant who was ranked in the top 50 of the Prodigy Gold leaderboard. Oh, this is truly a joyous occasion. The heavens are destined to let demon god Lin fall into our hand. Shui Zhixian said with a smile. His eyes were teasing, and his smile was very bright. Because this time, he wanted to seize Lin Sun's chance. Now that he knew that Lin Sun was Yang Tianqi's enemy, it was even better. Killing him would kill two birds with one stone. In the distance, the figures of some powerhouses appeared. They were alarmed by the commotion here and came over. When they understood the identities of the two parties, they couldn't help but gasp and subconsciously retreat far away. Xue Zhixian of the Wutian sect was a notorious ancient freak. He was powerful enough to look down on all heroes, and his combat strength was unparalleled. And Yang Tianqi wasn't inferior either. Now that the two of them had appeared together, who wouldn't be shocked? Similarly, when they recognized Lin Sun's identity, the powerhouses couldn't remain calm either. One should know that the battle that happened in front of Kongzhi Mountain not long ago had already spread throughout the upper 9 realms. Who would have thought that the demon god Lin, who had forced Mingzi to flee in panic and oppressed Gu Fozhi, would appear in the Buddha Earth of the Zhen Mountain region? Moreover, he had encountered 2 longevity giants of the Wutian sect. I want him dead. Apart from that, all his treasures will belong to you. Yang Tianqi's voice was indifferent. Okay. Xue Zhixian nodded, his expression calm. The big black bird was so angry that he almost stomped his feet. These two guys wanted to decide Lin Sun's life and death with just a few words. This attitude was really arrogant. Old Black, you watch from the side. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. There was no contempt or fear in them, only a surging killing intent in his heart. Originally, for the sake of Lu Kaiwei, he didn't want to go too far. Unfortunately, the other side regarded him as a person who could be slaughtered at will. This had seriously provoked Lin Sun's bottom line. Do you two want to die one by one or together? Lin Sun said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, not only the people in the distance were shocked, but also Yang Tianqi and Old Black. Then, undisguised killing intent appeared in their eyes. Lin Sun, it's indeed enough for you to be proud of defeating Mingzi and Gu Fozhi. But in front of me, do you have the right to be proud? Xue Zhixian stared at Lin Sun and said in a cold tone, there are many powerhouses and giants in the upper 9 realms. You have no idea that there is always someone better than you. Get lost. Lin Sun didn't want to talk nonsense. He stepped into the void and punched. It was simple and direct, but it was indomitable and invincible. Yang Tianqi narrowed his eyes. Just one punch showed him that the description of Lin Sun in the rumors was not exaggerated. This man had indeed become extremely powerful. Compared with when he was in Green Flame City, he was like a completely different person. This result caused him to put away the contempt he felt in his heart. He didn't dare to underestimate this person. Someone who could defeat Underworld Child and Gu Fuzhi was naturally not an ordinary person. What Yang Tianqi didn't know was that Lin Sun didn't use the strongest means of leakless permanence, because his opponent didn't deserve it. Boom! There was a roar and a burst of divine light. Xue Zhixian's silver robe fluttered. He roared and fought Lin Sun with all his strength. Of course, he also knew how powerful Lin Sun was. He didn't treat Lin Sun as an ordinary person, so he used his real strength as soon as he attacked. Bang! 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 The light collided like 2 volcanoes. The void exploded, and the rolling divine light poured down like a tide, turning all the nearby rocks into powder. Countless ghastly fissures appeared on the ground, spreading in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the two had fought dozens of times. Then, Xue Zhixian collapsed and staggered back. His chest rose and fell, his qi and blood tumbled, and his face turned pale. When he looked at Lin Sun again, his eyes were full of surprise and solemnity. The previous confrontation made him feel like he was fighting with a towering mountain, and he had a feeling that he was unshakable and insignificant. It was hard to believe. In the distance, everyone was shocked and stunned. There was only one thought in their minds. As expected of demon god Lin, he was unparalleled in strength. Xue Zhixian was an extremely powerful giant of the longevity realm, and he was extremely dazzling. But he couldn't shake Lin Sun. Yang Tianqi saw it clearly, and his expression was uncertain. He had misjudged Lin Sun. He thought that even if Lin Sun was stronger than Mingzi, he would not be much stronger. But the result was completely different. He didn't rush to attack. He wanted to further confirm. Trash! The big black bird was disdainful. He spat out these two words, and he was very happy. Xue Zixin took a deep breath, and his eyes were like lightning, bursting with cold light. He realized that it was a little tricky this time, and he had underestimated his opponent. But he was not afraid, because Yang Tianqi hadn't attacked yet. Kill! Xue Zixin moved. His palms glowed with blue Taoist light, and then a crystal-clear blue Taoist sword emerged from his palms. This sword was only the size of a palm, but it was bright and sharp. Like a vast ocean, it emitted blue Taoist light, which dyed the void magnificent blue. Misty Sea Taoist sword, someone exclaimed. This was one of the 4 supreme swords of the Skyless sect, and it had a peerlessly sharp edge. Swish! Xue Zixin rushed over with the sword, and his aura was strong. His sword intent was like a vast sea, sweeping the universe. Moreover, on his body, obscure and complicated Taoist patterns appeared, condensing into the head of a fierce beast. This was the talent of his fighting soul, which enabled him to exert far more combat power than ordinary people. Lin Sun looked calm, and his aura was extremely restrained, exuding a simple and natural aura. Every punch and every move was understated and untainted. In fact, this was the embodiment of power condensed to the extreme. The Great Way was the simplest. So was martial arts. With a wisp of its charm, one could become divine. Thus, a strange scene appeared in the field. Xue Zixin's momentum and power were so strong that everyone was paying attention to him. But he was suppressed by Lin Sun firmly. Every time he attacked, every time he tried to kill, he was easily defeated by Lin Sun. He couldn't even touch Lin Sun's clothes, let alone hurt Lin Sun. Invulnerability was just SOSO. Go to hell! Xue Zixin roared, and his face was distorted. His whole body was shining, more dazzling than the sun, and he was extremely crazy. He had completely realized that something was wrong and decided to fight. A Dao sword was like a rainbow that shot into the sky. It destroyed the world, destroyed yin and yang, and was peerlessly sharp and piercing to the point everyone in the distance were unable to open their eyes. But Lin Sun looked calm and punched out. Bang! The Misty Sea Taoist sword wailed and trembled violently. Xue Zixin seemed to be struck by lightning. His rib cage was broken, and his eyes, nose, and mouth were bleeding. He let out a shrill scream, and his body was smashed to the ground like a broken sandbag. Everyone was shocked by this scene. No one had expected that a peerless figure like Xue Zixin would be defeated so quickly and miserably, which was too incredible. There is always someone better than you. Do you understand now? Lin Sun stepped forward, and his voice was indifferent. The whole field became more and more silent. Before, everyone heard that it was Xue Zixin's sarcastic words, but now it fell on Xue Zixin's head. This was simply the most vivid interpretation of the 4 words, bring disgrace upon oneself. Whoosh! However, when Lin Sun was about to kill Xue Zixin completely, a stream of sword qi, like a startling rainbow, came to him. It was Yang Tianqi. He attacked at this moment and joined the battle. Lin Sun was not surprised. His black eyes locked on Yang Tianqi like lightning, and a touch of coldness appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's time to put an end to the enmity of the past and the shame of today. P.S. If you like it, please subscribe more. I haven't asked for subscriptions for a long time. I hope you can read the original version. After all, goldfish have to rely on subscriptions to make a living. In addition, if goldfish go home early tonight, they will make up for the last update they owe. Chapter 1289. When he first saw Lin Sun, Yang Tianqi was very surprised and delighted. It was like meeting an enemy whom he hadn't seen for many years. He even made up his mind to kill Lin Sun this time to remove this thorn in his flesh. But when he witnessed Xue Zhixian's crushing defeat, his joy was extinguished like a basin of cold water. His body stiffened and was replaced by an indescribable horror. He felt terrible all over. Relatively speaking, although his combat strength was not weaker than Xue Zhixian's, it was not much better. How could he fight? However, Yang Tianqi had to take action because Xue Zhixian was in a desperate situation. In order to ensure his own safety, Yang Tianqi decided to retreat as soon as he saved Xue Zhixian. This was undoubtedly an extremely humiliating decision. Unfortunately, Lin Sun did not intend to give him a chance. Boom! Lin Sun wiped out the sword qi like a waterfall with a raise of his hand, and he had already rushed to Yang Tianqi. His speed was so fast that Yang Tianqi was completely unprepared. His face suddenly changed, and he had to try his best to resist. Then, Yang Tianqi finally experienced the feeling of being completely suppressed. No matter how powerful his means and how powerful his treasures were, they were all destroyed and suppressed by Lin Sun one by one. It was like an ant trying to shake a tree. It was impossible to describe Yang Tianqi's state of mind. Many years ago, when he saw Lin Sun for the first time, he was extremely disdainful and repulsive. Even just now, when facing Lin Sun, who was totally different from before, he still maintained the pride and conceit of a bigwig of the immortal realm. But now, all his disdain, rejection, pride, and conceit were all smashed, crushed, and trampled on the ground. His face became livid, angry, and disheveled. He was like a trapped beast on the verge of a desperate situation with no way to retreat. Where was the demeanor of a bigwig of the immortal realm? Boom! After another punch, Yang Tianqi coughed up blood. His light cyan hair was messy, and his muscles were trembling and twitching. He was already injured. It was difficult for him to protect himself, let alone save Xue Zhixian. In the distance, it was dead silent. Everyone was in a trance. Who could believe that the two bigwigs of the Heavenless sect from the Saint Hermit place were completely suppressed by Lin Sun? Moreover, Lin Sun's posture showed that he was relaxed and effortless from beginning to end. Another trash! The big black bird evaluated, becoming more and more arrogant, full of disdain towards Yang Tianqi. Just now, he was still so arrogant, but now, he was beaten to the point of almost kneeling. At the same time, it was also keenly aware that after being trapped in the land of tragic death for a few days, Lin Sun's combat strength had undergone a complete transformation. It was obvious that his cultivation had not increased, but his battle prowess was much stronger than before. This kid must have obtained a lot of benefits, the big black bird muttered to itself. Bang! Not long after, Yang Tianqi's entire body was bathed in blood, and he was also struck down from the clouds. His body smashed onto the ground like a toad, and it was a tragic sight to behold. On the dark blue treasured vessel, the delicate woman was dumbstruck. Her beautiful face was ghastly pale while her teeth were chattering. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have never imagined that the legendary godfiend Lin was actually so terrifying. When she thought about how they'd stopped such a terrifying figure and intended to make him obediently hand over the fortune in his possession, she felt like she was about to collapse. However, before she collapsed, Yang Tianqi collapsed first. He trembled as he stood up, and his expression changed indeterminately. Lin Sun, for the sake of junior sister Lu, can you spare us this time? He was begging for mercy. In the distance, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. The begging of an immortal realm powerhouse seemed so inconceivable, and it also served as a foil to how terrifying Lin Sun was. Was Xue Zhixian and Yang Tianqi not strong enough? No. It was their opponent who was stronger than them, and not just by a little bit. This was what it meant by there was always someone stronger out there. It's over. Lin Sun was very calm. With a thump, Yang Tianqi's head fell to the ground. A peerless figure of a generation had fallen just like that. At the moment of his death, His pupils opened wide in disbelief. Unfortunately, Yang Tianqi didn't know that if he'd cared about Lu Saiwei's face at the beginning, the outcome would definitely not have been like this. He could only say that he brought all of this upon himself. On the ground, Xue Zhixian seemed to have been greatly stimulated, and he charged up explosively and fled into the distance. Pooh! The broken blade flashed out and cut off his head, following in Yang Tianqi's footstep. The battlefield was dead silent, and only the stench of blood permeated the air. On the blue treasure ship, the petite woman was already scared out of her wits. Her face was pale and translucent. Is it cruel? Lin Sun looked up. The petite woman shuddered as her teeth chattered. She shook her head and said, "Yes, they were the ones who robbed us. They brought this upon themselves." Lin Sun retracted his gaze. At that moment, the large black bird had already cleaned up the battlefield and returned happily after collecting all the spoils of war. "Remember to collect their corpses." After saying that, Lin Sun and the large black bird set off without looking at the petite woman again. Watching them leave, the experts watching the battle from afar all felt a sense of relief, and the chill in their hearts slowly faded. When they looked at Yang Tianqi and Xue Zhixian's corpses again, their expressions were filled with pity. Why did they have to offend demon god Lin of all people? If this wasn't their own fault, what was it? As for the petite woman, she was already sitting there in a daze, as though she had broken down. "This is yours." On the way, the large black bird placed a portion of the spoils of war into a storage bag and threw it to Lin Sun. "You don't seem to have done anything, right?" Lin Sun shot a glance at the thieving bird. Everyone who saw it has a share. Don't you know the rules?" The large black bird did not stand on ceremony at all. His shamelessness left Lin Sun in awe. "Cut the crap. Quickly lead the way." Lin Sun checked the storage bag. There were 2 divine herbs and some rather precious divine materials inside. It was clear that the large black bird had good table manners. 3 days later, under the large black bird's guidance, Lin Sun arrived at an extremely strange region. There were many mountains here, but every mountain peak was made up of piles of white bones. At a glance, it was a winding mountain of bones that left one's scalp tingling. "This is Stupaland." The large black bird stretched out his claws and pointed to the distance. In the center of Stupaland, there is a stupa tower made of white bones. It is 3,000 feet high, and it is called 3,000 stupa. I've come here once in the past. That Buddha's pagoda is extremely miraculous, and it completely suppressed the baleful aura in this area. Otherwise, merely this dense mountain of bones would have transformed into a place of great danger, and it would give birth to terrifying and strange living beings. So, the existence of this tower is a good thing. Lin Sun was surprised. Exactly. I suspect that the 3,000 pagoda was created by an almighty figure with exceedingly great Buddhist dharma for the sake of suppressing and sealing the aura of this place of great danger. Speaking of this, the large black bird suddenly took off the black pot on his back and shook it gently. Gu Fozi's doppelganger was thrown to the ground. His nose was bruised and swollen, and he was obviously still in a coma. Next, according to the previous plan? The large black bird asked. "Okay." Lin Sun nodded. Immediately, the 2 walked away quietly. Lin Sun covered their figures with miasma qi. Not long after, Gu Fozi's doppelganger woke up from his coma. When he opened his eyes, he was stunned at first, and then he was shocked. He stood up and looked around. His expression was also uncertain, and it took a while for him to recover his composure. "This bald ass is calm," the large black bird murmured secretly. Lin Sun was also a little surprised. He had to admit that Gu Fozi's temperament was extremely tough, and he didn't lose his composure at such a time. "Lin Sun, I already know your plot. It is nothing more than letting me lead the way and take you to see my original body." Suddenly, Gu Fuzi spoke with a dignified and incomparably calm expression. "Fine, since you want to give your life away, then this monk will naturally fulfill your wish. Then, he rushed to the mountains of white bones in the distance. He was calm as if he had already expected that Lin Sun was hiding in the dark. However, Lin Sun wouldn't be stupid enough to show his figure. He and the large black bird covered themselves with miasma chi and followed quietly. Do you see? This is the pagoda land, created by a holy Buddha at the beginning of ancient times. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. This holy Buddha once killed countless foreign enemies to resist the attack of the 8 regions. In the distance, Gu Fozi said indifferently, the mountains of white bones you see are all left by the strong warriors of the other 8 regions. For the ancient desolation realm, these white bones are nothing. He didn't look back and kept moving forward. Not long after, an extremely unique white bone mountain appeared. The reason why it was unique was that this mountain was built by a skeleton. This skeleton was extremely huge, thousands of meters high. It was like an ancient giant kneeling there, towering like a mountain. Although countless years had passed, it still gave people a sense of oppression. This is the corpse of a saint from the giant spirit blood clan in the blood demon ancient realm. He was killed by a supreme force. This was the first time Lin Sun heard the name Blood Demon Ancient Realm. Not long after, they encountered another strange mountain. It was formed by a huge and thick coiled skeleton, like the skeleton of a coiled python dragon. This was left by a saint from the Candle Dragon bloodline in the extreme ancient realm. It was burned to death by the holy Buddha with a green lamp. Gu Fozi's clone seemed to know the origin of this area like the back of his hand. This made Lin Sun and the large black bird a little surprised. It should be known that the absolute domain had only appeared a few times since ancient times, and it was only in this world that a sealed place like the pagoda land had broken the seal and appeared in the world. How could Gu Fozi know so many secrets? This is the corpse of a sword saint from the all-heaven ancient region. His sword insight is extraordinary and peerlessly formidable. For the sake of crushing this person, that sacred Buddha suffered an irreparable injury, and in the end, this sacred Buddha passed away after he constructed the 3,000 pagoda. Ancient Buddha's clone stood still and looked at a humanoid skeleton that was standing. Its spine was straight like a sword, and every inch of its bones was branded with the sharpness of sword will. After countless years of wear and tear, its spine didn't bend at all, and it couldn't completely erase the sharp sword chi on its body. Because this was the skeleton of a sword saint. P.S. Update sent. At this point, 7 updates have been completed. I feel relieved. Please give me monthly votes to encourage me. Chapter 1290. Although the skeleton of the sword saint had fallen for eons, it still stood proudly in the world, and had never fallen. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel shocked when he saw this scene. But when he thought about how this sword saint came from the Daluo ancient region, Lin Sun only felt respect, not awe or admiration. Only by acknowledging the opponent's strength could one clearly realize one's own shortcomings. This bald donkey has been blabbering all along the way. What exactly is he planning? The big black bird muttered, not understanding what was going on. In the end, it's just a clone. It can't do anything. Let's just watch him perform. Lin Sun was very calm. What they didn't expect was that Gu Fuzi spoke first. Lin Sun, are you curious why I'm telling you all this? It's actually very simple. I just want to tell you that in the eyes of the Ksitigarbha temple, a heretic like you is no different from the cultivators of the 8 regions. In the past, countless enemies of the 8 regions were buried here. Today you will be killed here. Gu Fuzi's voice was calm, as if it was a matter of course. If Lin Sun hadn't stopped him, the big black bird would have cursed out loud. This bald donkey was simply insane. If it wasn't for this mission, how could he have survived until now? Not long after, Gu Fuzi stopped and pointed into the distance. Look, that's the 3,000 pagoda. It's the place where the holy Buddha passed away. Looking in the direction of his finger, one could see a towering pagoda in the distance. It was extremely majestic and built from piles of bones, giving off a white luster. However, this scene wasn't horrifying. Instead, it gave off a holy and solemn feeling. In a trance, there seemed to be sounds of Sanskrit ringing out. A bloody land that bears witness to great mercy. The pagoda is a pagoda that can build supreme merit. That holy Buddha must have been a sage with great wisdom, mercy, and ability. The big blackbird sighed. Lin Sun was also sizing it up. The 3,000 pagoda was built from bones and stood between heaven and earth, suppressing this area. It seemed terrifying, but it was filled with a holy and solemn aura. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. However, ancient Buddha's clone no longer moved forward. Instead, he stood there in silence. Even his calm and tranquil expression carried a wisp of a complicated expression at this moment, and he stared blankly in silence. Could it be that this damned Baldy has seen through our plan and doesn't intend to meet his main body? The big blackbird's voice was also somewhat solemn. Before coming to the Buddha lands, he had already planned with Lin Sun that this operation was destined to kill Gu Fuzi's true body. Gu Fuzi's clone would play a key role in this operation. Let's wait and see. Lin Sun muttered. Lin Sun, do you really think that good will be rewarded with good and evil with evil? After a long moment of silence, ancient Buddha's clone suddenly spoke. He didn't look back, but rather stared at the 3,000 pagodas off in the distance. His voice was much deeper than before. In this world, those who do good suffer poverty and have a short life, while those who do evil enjoy wealth and have a long life. This has never been the case since ancient times. People in the secular world kill and set fire to gold belts, and repair bridges and roads without leaving corpses behind. We cultivators also use the pursuit of the Great Way as an excuse to act without fear of good or evil. What do you think is good and what is evil? Lin Sun and the big blackbird looked at each other. They could keenly sense that ancient Buddha's clone seemed to have changed into a different person after arriving here. It seemed very strange. As the saying goes, heaven's net has a long reach, but it never escapes. However, we cultivators do things that go against the heavens. Anyone who dares to stand in our way will be killed, destroyed, and destroyed. How can good and evil be rewarded? In ancient times, holy monk Du-ji of the Ksitigarbha temple once said that the heavenly way is clear. All living beings can be deceived, but their hearts can't. Cause and effect are all retribution. It's a pity that it's all for naught. If you want to distinguish good from evil, then all living beings in this world are evil. This applies to all living beings, including saints. As the saying goes, judge the world by good and evil. At this point, ancient Buddha suddenly stopped and pursed his lips. I understand now. This bald monk's mind is in a mess. He cultivates the Good and Evil Salvation Sutra created by the good and evil Lord Buddha. Now, he seems to have fallen into a self-obsession. The big black bird reminded him telepathically. In your opinion, how should one distinguish good from evil? Lin Sun suddenly asked curiously. The big black bird sneered. What is good? What is evil? Even sages can't tell, let alone you and me. Don't listen to this bald monk's nonsense. Holy monk Du-ji once said that there's no good or evil in one's actions, as long as one has a clear conscience. Do you understand? Lin Sun was slightly stunned and then deeply agreed. One should naturally have a clear conscience when doing things. As for good and evil, it was left for later generations to judge. This is strange. This bald monk is just a clone. He's about to meet his true self. Why is his heart in a mess now? The big blackbird was puzzled. Lin Sun couldn't figure it out either. But both of them vaguely felt that this had something to do with the cultivation method that ancient Buddha had cultivated. Lin Sun, you've inherited the Great Silence Sutra and are a heretic that the Ksitigarbha temple must eliminate. But in your eyes, am I a heretic too? Ancient Buddha's clone suddenly asked. After saying that, he laughed at himself and then his expression became calm again. He said, "Discussing Zen with you is like playing the lute to a cow. Let's not talk about it." Then, he walked forward. He didn't say anything along the way. The closer they got to the 3,000 pagoda, the more they could feel the sacredness and solemnity of the pagoda. An invisible aura filled the air, making people feel a sense of vague awe. But beneath the pagoda were numerous bloody corpses that lay in disarray, and it instantly destroyed this holy atmosphere. There were male and female corpses scattered all over the place, and there were at least a few hundred of them. Obviously, they'd only died recently, and their corpses hadn't completely decayed yet. Their expressions were all filled with fear, despair, and unwillingness, and the way they died was extremely horrifying. Almost none of them were intact, as if they had been brutally killed. Lin Sun and the big black bird looked at each other and could see the shock in each other's eyes. Could this bloody scene have been done by Gu Fuzi himself? The surroundings were silent, and the pagoda stood tall. Apart from the holy aura, there was also the smell of blood, which made one shudder. Ancient Buddha's figure paused here, and then he continued forward, becoming more and more silent. Below the pagoda, a door opened leading to the inside. Under the gaze of Lin Sun and the big black bird, Ancient Buddha's clone gradually disappeared into the door. The plan is half done. Once his clone merges with his original body, the little tricks I set on his clone will be activated. At that time, killing him will be like killing a chicken. The big black bird was very excited and smiled sinisterly. Back then, it had saved Ancient Buddha's clone not because it was being kind, but because it wanted to use this opportunity to plot against Ancient Buddha. "Aren't you being too sinister?" Lin Sun glanced at it. The big black bird jumped up and down. "Don't forget how this bald donkey set up a trap for us on the river Styx. You were lucky that you were only trapped for 4 years. Otherwise, how could you still be standing here alive?" Lin Sun immediately shut up. The big black bird was right. Ancient Buddha had ambushed him more than once. This is called giving him a taste of his own medicine. It's not that I'm sinister, it's just heaven's way of retribution. The big black bird sighed and then asked, "Are we just going to wait here like this?" Lin Sun was about to speak, but suddenly, an extremely angry shout came from the pagoda. One word, full of surprise, fear, and disbelief. Then, it stopped abruptly. Ancient Buddha's clone. Lin Sun and the big black bird looked at each other, and their hearts trembled. Without hesitation, they also rushed into the gate of the pagoda. The pagoda was 3,000 feet high, and there was a stone staircase going up. Each wall was branded with ancient patterns, as if it was a narrative that recorded some secrets from ancient times. However, most of them were blurred and incomplete. Green lanterns hung on the stone pillars, and the shadows of the lanterns swayed, sprinkling a flickering luster. Lin Sun and the big black bird had no time to investigate these. They rushed up the stone stairs, and in the blink of an eye, they arrived at the 18th floor. This was also the highest point of the pagoda, and it was extremely spacious. The 4 walls were engraved with 18 mysterious patterns. In the center of the hall, terrifying sword chi filled the air, and it turned into a vortex that emitted a terrifying aura that could devour everything. A slender figure could be vaguely seen sitting there, and the terrifying sword chi vortex was emitted from it. At the side, there was a broken corpse covered in sword scars. Its eyes were wide open, and it was covered in blood. It was Gu Fuzi's clone. It had only been a dozen breaths since he entered the pagoda, but he had already suffered a calamity. Lin Sun and the big black bird's pupils shrank, and they looked at the slender figure sitting cross-legged. It was a young man in a jade robe, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His thick black hair hung loosely, and his back was straight like a sharp sword. He had handsome features, and his brows were sparse. As he sat there casually, he was like a peerless sword that had been sharpened through the ages. He had an extremely restrained elegance that wasn't dazzling, but it made one's heart palpitate. At this moment, strands of illusory sword chi surged out from the pores all over his body, and they converged together to transform into an extremely enormous vortex that caused the nearby space to wail and collapse. Swoosh! When he noticed Lin Sun and the big blackbird's gazes, the young man's closed eyes suddenly opened. At that moment, it was like a dazzling bolt of lightning that tore through the eternal darkness, illuminated the world, and terrified the soul. The big black bird's body stiffened imperceptibly, and its feathers stood on end as it felt a bone-piercing pressure. This fellow was simply too terrifying, but it was sure that this person wasn't ancient Buddha himself. At the same time, Lin Sun was shocked in his heart, and then a strand of peerlessly dazzling divine light suddenly shot out from his eyes that were deep like an abyss. The big black bird could keenly feel a formless and terrifying killing intent spread out from Lin Sun like a tide. Instantly, the void wailed, and the hall seemed to be drowned by endless cold currents. P.S. As usual, 2 chapters in a row.